Okay, hold on. I
It's
think
a
we're
bit,
back. We're back.
it's
We're back. We're
it's a bit messed up, but like I want to post that everywhere.
back. Well, chat knows you're laughing about something they can't see. So
Oh no, yeah. I mean, like I could put. I'm fine with it being in the live stream. That doesn't bother me. But it's just without context, it's a bit like aggressive. and the like little the bottom bit of the 5 and 2/8 is kind of messed up.
Oh,
So
is it? If so, it's that way in the thumbnail too.
yeah, that's oh really? Oh, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's yeah, that's fine.
Oh yeah, I see what you. Well, no, I think that's just the picture.
Is
That's
it
like the
okay?
yeah. It's just moved around to the side. All right. Anyone
All
who
right.
wants to know what we're laughing at can hit me up on
Yeah.
Discord later. But anyway, hello everyone.
We
Welcome to
have
the noise
yeah.
floor. We, as as Andrew would say, we sort of have a show for you today.
Yeah, we got some topics.
Yeah,
Topics of discussion.
ostensibly there will be a show.
Yeah. Uh of course, we have myself, and I'm joined today by the uh misbegotten spawn of one Fidel Castro. Of course, the joke there, for anybody who doesn't realize it, is the resemblance to the former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is uncanny. Um,
Still
but I
don't
will
see it,
say
but people seem to be having fun with it.
it's not unfounded. Think about it. You haven't actually seen them both in the same room together, so we don't have any evidence that he's not the misbegotten spawn of Fidel Castro. So the
Other
legacy
than
lives on.
my name and American Social
Ah,
Security number.
you can, yeah, you can fudge that these days.
Hi,
All right.
Sam.
So our topic of discussion, just before we get into topic of discussions, as always, these streams are brought to you by headphones.com. Headphones.com is a great place to learn about buy headphones, all of that good stuff. They make it possible for us to do this. They provide the measurement equipment. And if you guys are in the market for new headphone related products, headphones and audio products, keep headphones.com in mind for that, because it literally supports what we do. There are also DACs and amps and and speakers and all kinds of other things there as well, that are worth checking out. And they have a ridiculous 365-day return policy, so you can be confident in your purchase. And as far as the other little housekeeping stuff here, these streams are, of course, made possible on Spotify as well, I believe, and also some other podcasting platforms. So if you would like to not see us, then just look for the noise floor on those streaming services, and it should show up. Other than that, we pull topics from the forum, which should be linked below. And these topics are, we're running dry as always. We do have some for today, but more is always better. So if you guys have ideas and want your topics of discussion featured on the next episode of the Noise Floor, please contribute there as well. And lastly, you can connect with us in our Discord, which should also be linked below. So let us get into the topic at hand, the main topic here: best headphone technologies and why. And I think when I originally put this, just sort of threw this question up, it was when I regurgitated this question, it was to do with the idea about, like, people have these sorts of ideas about, like, different driver types or different driver technologies, being better or worse, right? But I actually think the more interesting thing there is to also talk about things like waveguides, or like maybe like the AMTS stuff from DCA, like the merits of that kind of stuff, or other things to do with just acoustics and headphones generally that are not just related to the driver technologies that are going on
Yeah, and I think we maybe probably should talk about the driver technologies too,
as well.
because
Yes. So why don't
because
we
they do
start there?
matter.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best jumping off point. Yeah. So, do you want to start or should I?
Yeah. Feel free to start.
Cool. Um, well, I guess instead of like what is the best, I think it's reasonable to talk about what are the merits
That's yeah.
of each, right?
Mhm.
And I think, you know, I am prone to starting with the humble dynamic driver because there are things about it that I think are really good for headphones. They're very based on the components of them, so based on the diaphragm, the compliance and material thereof, and the composition of, the I guess dependence or independence of the surround versus kind of the central material, the design of the voice coil, presence or design of a former. There are so many components that can go into a relatively small, relatively light headphone driver that because of coupling gain means, it doesn't need to be massive to produce bass in most instances. Obviously, that'll vary depending on the acoustics of the headphone design itself. But there are other benefits. The smallness and kind of shortness of contiguous area across the diaphragm does mean things like modal distortions for smaller drivers, like smaller dynamic drivers, can actually be better than some larger planar drivers or others in kind of the upper end of the frequency band. Um, and what some may see as a detriment, but I see as maybe a benefit, depending on how the rest of the acoustics of the headphone work out, is that them having a kind of a hump around the free air resonance of the driver means that in fully open headphones, so open back as well as kind of open, acoustically open front volume headphones, you can still get bass depending on how the resonant frequency of the driver is tuned. Um,
Yeah. So actually, I think so. The reason why I like dynamic drivers generally is all of those things, but specifically because that can be achieved with a much smaller footprint in a headphone's design, meaning you
yes.
can do all kinds of other things with that, right? So if you
Mhm.
if you compare, for example, what you just said about, the driver's resonance frequency, in open back headphones, in order to achieve that, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it's the comparable driver FS would end up requiring a much larger membrane or larger footprint in a planar, for example. Again, not always, not necessarily, but I've noticed that as a trend, right? Like
Mhm.
I've noticed that, like for the ones that are like these, ultra low, driver resonance, ultra low FS planars, the drivers end up also being enormous.
Yeah, like
And if you,
literally twice the size of dynamic drivers in many
yeah,
cases.
and heavier too, right? So
Yeah, yeah, more
to
than
me, it's
twice
like,
as heavy.
yeah. So to me, it's like you can basically do full range in open back headphones with a dynamic driver with a much smaller footprint than you typically find, I should say, in planars or certain other driver technologies that have these sort of large membrane styles. And it also means that you can do other things acoustically um, with the designs. So, for example, you don't really see as commonly, at least, and I can't think of anything at the moment, uh, with planars where you do this sort of angle baffle thing, but you see that all the time in dynamic driver headphones. And I have to imagine that part of that is to do with it being a more suitable technology, like driver technology, uh, for um, for space reasons, right? For like being able to design within what is effectively a small-ish enclosure of
Yeah.
some kind.
Yeah, I think the closest you get to that is, like, the Odyssey stuff, but the baffle itself isn't angled, it's just
No,
the
it's the
pads are
pads. Yeah, yeah,
angled.
yeah. The pads.
Yeah,
You have to accomplish that in many cases with pads, which is also fine, right? That's not
yeah,
like a bad thing. And there are acoustic reasons to do that. Like, I've sort of been discovering with the angle baffle stuff. Like a lot of that is it's a matter of like making things a bit brighter. Well, it depends. I'm talking specifically about the drivers that I'm using here. It tends to
mhm.
kind of shift the frequency up, well, a lot, depending on the angle, right?
Yeah, but
um,
in that band, we know that the, I guess, flange or pinna are, like, actually contributing to largely,
more, yeah.
so, like, that kind of post 3 kilohertz, uh, region.
Yeah, so you're getting more pinna stuff, um, which may or may not be good, but it depends kind of on like what you're trying to achieve. But it's just the point there is that you can have a bit more flexibility with respect to that kind of stuff with moving coil drivers, right? I think
Yeah.
The other side of this topic is a little bit to do with some of the sort of like intangibles that people are used to when it comes to the various different driver technologies as they are instantiated in headphones that people have heard. So, for example, the what are some of the most common planars that people have heard? Well, it's the hi-fi man stuff, for example, or
Mhm.
the Odyssey type stuff. Um, and I think that my sense of it, at least, is that these other driver technologies are a little bit less mature in terms of their implementation than what we have with moving coil drivers. So I will say that's
Yeah. No, you don't
that's
you
that's
don't
one
see
thing.
many planars being tuned with, with baffles or, like, bass tubes or
Yeah, that
yeah,
it's there. I think there's like some innovation still happening in that space, right? But and there are advantages to planars and e-stats as well, right?
which we'll talk
So
about.
yeah, but I think subjectively, when people think about this stuff, like they think, oh, planars are better than dynamic drivers, e-stats are better than planars, something along those lines, right, for over your headphones.
I think
That
for many
seems to
people, that
be
is how it ends up
yeah,
going.
and part of that has to do, I imagine, with uh planars again, as they are commonly instantiated, ending up being able to um have more energy like fully into the sub bass, like fully flat linear bass extension all the way down to 20 hertz, and a lot more high frequency stuff as well at the
Mm,
same time. Um, that or like excess, let's say, high frequency stuff. And this has traditionally imparted an extra sort of sense of so let's say detail, or the sort of like transient nimbleness. This is just words I'm saying, but you get the idea. That sort of subjective goodness side of things that people attach to excess, or really good treble extension or excess treble. That is more commonly found in planars and e-stats. But when it comes to the technology itself, the key advantage there is usually to do more with things like harmonic distortion. Um, and I would say that like being able to have an ultra low resonance frequency is a nice thing, right? Um, like I'm thinking of as they're instantiated, like the Hi-Fi Man headphones, where if you break the seal on the Hi-Fi Man like open back, you actually get more bass because the resonance frequency is so low on those for most of them. Um, but as far as like that sort of like more linear trajectory of like dynamic driver, planars are better than dynamics, e-stats are better than planars. The one area where I'd say that is true is usually, not always, but often, in terms of harmonic distortion, and that's
I actually
again.
disagree there.
Well, I'm thinking again, remember, as they are instantiated, right? So, like,
Yeah, that's
Odyssey
what I mean.
planars and DCAs typically have, or
Mm,
often have, better harmonic distortion than what you get with common dynamic driver or moving coil headphones. That doesn't mean that that's necessarily always the case, and I can think of a number of examples where it's not the case, right? Like,
mm.
there are certain dynamic driver designs where it's actually quite a bit lower in harmonic
Yeah,
distortion.
I was just thinking of, like, the planar designs where people, I feel like, do usually have more of, like, a subjectively, like, wow moment. It's
Mm,
usually, like, the more, like the Hi-Fi Man stuff,
yep.
but that is where, like, I feel like they're actually worse when it comes to distortion than, like, a
The
typical
Hi-Fi Man
dynamic
ones,
driver.
yeah, the large diaphragm ones can be, right, and there's other
Yeah.
examples too where they're worse, like the Abyss headphones, like the
Yeah,
12C
it's
acoustic,
usually the large diaphragm, low damping, low
low
tension.
tension. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So it really depends on this is a matter of like, you know, uh, okay, I won't say okay, necessary and sufficient conditions, but we won't go into philosophy. Um, but the point is more like, yeah, there's like the driver technology in theory, and then there's the way they are instantiated, right?
Yeah.
So, um, but like I have yet to come across. Maybe you have, but I haven't come across moving coil drivers that have as good performance for harmonic distortion as what you get with like certain odysseys. You know,
The only ones I could think of are extremely small.
yeah. So it's
Yeah, like
you know,
the Apple AirPods Pro 2 drivers are the only dynamic drivers I know of that are
yeah, and that's not
comparable in performance when sealed in situ and measured at the same point, but,
yeah
like,
yeah
they have to resonate a much smaller air volume at, much lower like power, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
And
not
then
really an ideal circumstance.
yeah. And then you do get similar sorts of trends with E-stats as you would with planars. Um, but actually, this is a question for you.
So,
What do you think would be the intangible benefits or like the subjective benefits that people generally associate with E-stats over planars or
oh, okay,
dynamics?
so we're going to E-stats now.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I would say it actually largely has to do with the fact, well, for one, I think it has to do with E-stat tuning, typically being different because of the difference in acoustics. Like
Yeah.
E-stats tend to have a more forward mid-range than planars do, like where planars you'll typically, but not always, see a dip somewhere in the 1 to 2 kilohertz region. With E-stats, you often see a forwardness of 1 kilohertz elevated over the lower mid-range in the bass.
And you can
Um,
see that in certain planars as well. Like it's
yeah, yeah, it's a very common thing in like the Stack C stats, for example,
yeah.
but also like the Odyssey Carbon and regardless. The second thing about them that is meaningfully different is EStat designs tend to be, not always, but I'm thinking of like the Stacks Lambda series or something like that, like the L700 or stuff like that. Because the drivers are so goddamn thin and low mass that they essentially just like let air pressure through them. Like, I'm not saying they are like actually permeated by air, like they're not porous or anything, but they essentially are so low mass that there's such effectively low acoustic impedance in the front volume. Because one, the back is open, but two, the driver is such low mass that any pressure that hits upon that driver is just very efficiently transmitted to the other side of the driver,
Hmm.
right? Um, so I think those two work in tandem to EStats being perceived as faster.
Hmm.
Um, what people kind of call that ethereal presentation is kind of, I think, a mix of that speed that comes from the mids being elevated over the bass, and kind of the openness of everything, making it sound, well, like the sounds are kind of appearing out of the ether, because they're just, uh, like, when you have a Stax headphone on, you really don't feel any sense of occlusion. Like the room still sounds pretty much exactly like the
Hmm.
room, barring maybe a treble wonk or two. Um, they are probably the most open headphones I've personally tried, in terms of that effect. So
So you
there
think
is,
it's isolated, like the subjective effect that people enjoy is specifically isolated to the occlusion not being
well, I
there.
think they work in tandem. Like I think the
Yeah.
FR and the lack
And
of
the lack
occlusion
of
work
occlusion,
in
yeah.
tandem to kind of make people feel like, for one, the sounds are like preternaturally like weightless, like because there's like such a deficit of low mid range and bass compared to the center mid range and kind of the overtones. Um,
Stormbreaker says cheeseburger for some reason.
so true. Thank you so much for the cheeseburger, Stormbreaker. uh, but I also think these things contribute to like the positive, like the other spatial things, like the, I guess, the overall spaciousness, but I think the part of the ESTAT presentation that really does appeal to people is that sounds really do seem to kind of be like floating around you, instead
Mhm.
of being a helmet thing.
Yeah, I really think that's it. Like, to me, it's like I mean, I don't think people think of it like this, right? They think, well, the membrane moves, has sort of a faster,
The
uh
membrane is faster, so the sound is
yeah, yeah.
faster.
So it's exactly. But I think what you're saying is spot on, that it's a combination of, the FR tuning with an almost like kind of W character to the response, and the general perception that the sound is coming from effectively nowhere. Like, I actually have been so with some of the stuff that I've been designing, I had I had a design where I had a cup. This is just with a dynamic driver, where I had basically like a fully uh you know implemented acoustic design on one side, but the other cup had no driver in it and had no damping either. And it's a remarkable effect when you have occlusion going on with one, even if it's an open back, having a certain amount of damping there, right? There is some occlusion while the other one has none. It's like even a little bit of occlusion
Yeah.
is a very real, perceivable effect. And I think that's absolutely spot on for part of, why people are, they report this quality with e-stats. And I think it's a good quality,
I
you
think
know?
so too. Like I think I would have an E-stat around the house. Like I would
Yeah.
probably like it's not one of my favorites or anything, but it's a very attainable one. I would probably have like an L300 around. Like if I didn't also have to have everything else that comes with owning an E-stat.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is a
The
novel,
anxiety.
interesting. Well, yeah, but just like the extra gear. Like
Yeah.
I just already have too much stuff.
Yeah.
I would like to get an E-stat of some
Yeah.
sort in,
By the
but
way, Nope says bees chugger.
I
Just
did see
wanna
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's important.
this is very true.
Yeah.
I do want to remind people that you don't need to you don't need to super chat us.
Yeah, it's just
Uh,
yeah, there's no requirement. Um, so okay, so, other technologies,
well, I think we didn't really like
you wanna go
fully
more
touch
on
on the
yeah,
advantages of
sure,
all of the things we mentioned, right?
sure,
Because
yeah,
one of the upsides of planar magnetic designs is that they're kind of a midpoint where you get a very, in terms of the actual moving mass of the diaphragm, a
mhm,
very lightweight, uniformly moving diaphragm, which
mhm,
if it's damped and tensioned
usually.
properly and all of that,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
ideally.
Which a lot of companies don't, and there are valid reasons not to. Like if you have it be a little bit larger, maybe a little bit heavier, but also of a low tension, you do get a very low free air resonance frequency. So for something like the original HE6, where even with like very acoustically open pads, the bass just goes all the way down to 20 hertz regardless. Like
Mhm.
you could just put that in free air and it'll probably still have bass down to like 40 or 50 hertz. It's nuts. Um, Now you do often have to contend with some kind of roughness and modal behavior in the treble when you do stuff like that, and in the mid range, frankly.
Depending on the damping.
Yeah, 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 depending on the either the self damping of the driver or the damping of the volume. But
Mhm.
for a lot of people, that is a genuinely good thing, and there's reason there's good reason for that to be probably the most useful driver type for things like listening tests.
Yep.
um like that kind of insignificance of the stiffness of the air in the front volume is genuinely a very good thing if you're going to be
Well,
putting this thing on multiple people's different heads and you're going to have multiple different ears inside that ear cup taking up different amounts of volume.
yeah, because basically you can expect this gets a little bit into one of the next topics, but basically the information below like 3 kilohertz is likely to be less variable than with
Mhm.
other types of designs.
Yeah, especially because and this is kind of nerdy, and I don't have I've only talked to Oratory about this. Like I don't have firsthand source info on this, but
Mhm.
apparently um the largeness of the wave hitting your ear and it being closer to um the size of the wave that hits your ear, because like a burst of air is like it's like a sphere, right?
Mhm.
And that sphere is going to have a radius, and with a small driver that radius is going to be smaller, and with a larger flatter driver it's going to be closer to the very large radius of a speaker radiating sound in a room, right?
Mhm.
um, so I'm not saying that has like a uh, directional effect or anything having to do with the input directivity of the ear. I don't really know because again, I don't have the first hand source info. But Oratory seems to think that this is a potential benefit of planars for the
Mm.
same task of like listening tests, like that wavefront being more plain, like has some sort of benefit to consistency or
Can
a likeness
yeah.
to the condition of speaker sound arriving at your ear. Um, I make no claims about that being preferable or anything like that. It's just something a buddy that I trust told me.
But also like we haven't actually seen I'm not aware of any listening experiments, um, large scale listening experiments at least, that have used like an Eggy Man, for example.
I know of nothing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know of
but the
nothing that has used non-dynamic drivers.
yeah. So what's interesting to me, like the advantage there would be, with respect to consistency, but I can also see them being like, well, most headphones are.
Did Andrew just freeze for anyone else? Okay, yeah, you went away, and now you're
Okay.
back.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Excellent. I don't know if that's excellent. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh, but one thing that one thing that we notice at least with those Eggy Mans is, so this gets into the as I mentioned before, it gets into the next sort of topic a little bit. But one of the things, this sort of this big mystery for me at least, is the cause of the variability in the 1 to 3 kilohertz band that we see between systems like the BNK 5 and 2.8 and the Gross um, systems. Whether this is to do with an acoustic impedance thing or ear proximity thing or something else, a positional thing. And like in my head, I think this has to be acoustic impedance, because that's the trend that we observe when comparing headphones like, the egg-shaped hi-fi mans versus other acoustically open headphones, of different driver types. Well, specifically moving coil drivers, where the variability for the moving coil driver headphones are, it's quite a bit wider in that band. Um,
Yep.
so that's just something that's interesting to me, and it might be one area where, yeah, planar consistency is, planar in situ consistency is just better. Um, but
I
again,
would be I would be interested to do some testing, and you and I should connect on this at a different time and actually like see what
yeah,
happens if when you close off the back of an Eggy Man or something like
yep,
that with masking tape or something,
hmm
if that characteristic changes, because if it doesn't, then that means it actually has more to do with
ear
potentially
proximity,
ear proximity or the shape of the wave hitting the ear.
yep, yep. So things to be investigated there.
Mhm.
But as far as like, to get back to what you're saying before about the advantages of the other types, um, was there anything specific about e-stats that you, other than the lack of occlusion?
Extremely low mass and extremely like uniform motion.
Mm,
So like as far as I'm aware, the things that we really like about the Odyssey dynamic or Odyssey planar drivers and how they have very low distortion, it seems like that is achieved much easier in eStats, um,
hmm
where you just get like a crazy low distortion just because, I mean, it's not magnets, having to pull from different spots of the driver. It's like static is charged equally along the entire surface. Um, Now, I will confess I know the least about eStats by a significant margin. I've never owned one. I've never tinkered with one. But as far as I'm concerned, the main benefit to them is the ultra low mass and how that contributes to the uniformness of motion, but also how the ultra low mass contributes to, again, kind of the air transfer, air impedance thing I was talking about. They're incredibly open. Like
hmm
in all of the like the acoustic impedance testing that Grell has cited, like the stuff that they're doing in I forget the university, but um consistently the Stacks designs and in the Hammershoing Moeller work before that stuff, like consistently the Stacks designs have been the most open by a slight margin over things like the HD 800.
Interesting. Um, what's your sense of? So we talk about one of the disadvantages, or like the instantiated disadvantages of, many planars that we commonly come across, is the increased modal behavior, particularly like especially in the as things are go up in frequency. Um, some of the modal stuff, the jaggedy shit, can go quite extreme.
Yeah.
But that is not necessarily the case when you introduce a certain amount of damping. Um,
Yeah, either by tensioning the driver more
yeah.
or by damping the system more. Yep.
And I guess the question that I have for you is, what do you prefer as a method of design for planars? Do you I know you don't like planars generally, but like when you if you are considering planars, like if you compare something like a Hi-Fi Man, you know, Aria ish thing,
Mhm.
and a MM500, which is much more critically damped. Um, do you actually think, because to me, okay, it's not about like one is better than the other. It's about like achieving a good balance that um that affects the frequency response in a positive way, right?
Mhm.
And and so to me, like the headphones that achieve the best balance there are things like the Moondrop Cosmo,
Yeah, I was gonna bring
right?
up the Cosmo because I think that's
Yeah,
probably actually the best balance of
yeah,
critically damped, maybe slightly underdamped diaphragm, but with good damping of the system with that kind of that like
yeah.
black nylon screen they have in front of the driver.
Hmm.
That seems it's like very high tensioned and seemingly consistent given the channel balance.
Yeah. And
I
again,
like
people,
that. Um, and I think it probably would be better for me than either the paradigm of like large diaphragm, ultra low damping, ultra
yeah,
low tension, or slightly smaller diaphragm, but like critical damping, extra damping of the Odyssey design.
yeah. So
Um,
people do think when they hear high damping, they think less detail, right? Like often
so
that's not the way to think about this. I just want to
yeah,
make it clear.
yeah,
Damping is good, but I think that it's important to like figure out the balance and make your considerations with respect to damping um for the kind of tuning that you're trying to achieve, right? For the kind of result that you're trying to get.
yeah. To be clear,
Um
it's also not a situation where like damping is a free lunch because you're like getting to just stuff your cup with stuff and the treble resonance is like widen in Q and smooth out and stuff like that. Like it's not always a good thing to damp more. Um, but I would say the bigger issue is that a lot of people do treat damping as this kind of inherently negative thing that just robs your technicalities when
yeah.
it
Well,
just isn't that way.
and Jack brings up a good question here: is why are the Bayer DT900 Pro X blunt then, if not the damping? And
Mm,
I would actually
the
say
mids
that.
on that are very warm.
Well, I would also say that like this is the damping in the sense that it, for whatever reason, seems to cause like certain treble roll offs or meaningful dips in the treble. That is the cause of the effect of like blunting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would
Which
still say
maybe
a little bit bright of a headphone.
overall, yes, but there are
Yeah.
certain, like, in at least for me, in situ, there are certain nulls, right? Or
Oh, are
certain
they?
like roll offs. I don't know what specifically to call it, but basically like
Dips.
absences of presence,
Okay.
that the damping is likely affecting. So it's not for the damping itself, it's for what the
Right.
damping does to the frequency response of the eardrum. That would be
Got it.
my sense of it. In situ at least. And the other side of it is, of course, well, at least I assume that this is going to increase the acoustic, increase certain things, it'll increase the occlusion effect, uh but also the likely to increase the variability across people. um
I would say that's likely. They are very so like from what I understand about that design is that they're extremely damped. Like the
yeah.
pads themselves are like quite dense feeling and like I know they're velour so
Yeah.
the wrapping is open, but like they don't seem like they would transfer a lot of air to the outside, which I assume is why they're able to use the same pad on the 7 or the 700 Pro X as well.
Well, it's why I think about things like, I should do this test with the 900 Pro X and compare, for acoustic, basically to see how that looks on the 5 and 2/8 relative to the Gross in that 1 to 3 kilohertz band. That might be
Mm.
another good example of where we'd see a much higher variation despite it being an open back headphone or a wider kind of
Yeah,
result.
do we know how open the back of it is? I
That's the
would
other
assume
question.
I would assume it's
It's
very not open
yeah,
back,
kind
honestly.
of
Like,
open
and
at
I
most.
would say something having a more occludy sound can
Yeah.
also be heard as like more muffled, like
Yep.
more
Yep.
blunt, as
Exactly.
Jack
But,
says.
like,
So
people definitely have that sense of, like, increased damping equals, it's like restricting the driver more, the natural kind of, like, um, I don't know, freedom that the driver should enjoy, and that when you're
yeah,
damping it, you're robbing it of that, and that's not how any of this works.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, look, to answer your original question, if I were to design a planar driver, it would probably be quite a bit heavier than most of the drivers we currently see. I feel
like,
like
heavier in mass or heavier in, like, the physical thing weighs more?
in the moving mass of the diaphragm itself,
Got it.
not in terms
Got
of
it.
the magnet array.
Yeah, 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 okay.
I would firmly want to go against the kind of nanoscale meme
Well,
stuff that
yeah,
has
there's
been
really no
propagating over
reason.
time.
You like HE6 has a much, from my understanding at least, a much thicker, higher mass diaphragm or
And
membrane
it's
than
also more
most of the.
damped than most of
Yep,
the other hi-fi
and it
nano
also has a
headphones.
very low resonance frequency, so it's about moving mass.
Yep,
Um,
I would want to put something like that in a different shaped housing with a different pad and ergonomic scheme.
yeah.
Um, if I had to design a planar, which
See,
thankfully I don't.
I would look at, like, what the Cosmo does, because that's also kind of a unique design
It is.
generally.
Yeah.
I will say it's not, like, completely devoid of modal stuff, like, if you look
Yeah,
at it
yeah. That's why
in
I
a
said it's kind
totally
of
raw.
the in between of
Yeah, it's the in between,
Odyssey
and
and
it's
Hi-Fi
like
Man.
if you introduce an air gap, right? You see it does still rise. It's not like as high Q as what you get with the Hi-Fi Man designs, like the very open Hi-Fi Man designs. Um, but it's also not like a complete drop off like what you get with the Odysseys or the DCAs. Um, so I think it's a nice balance.
I think
Um,
so too.
yeah. How about other acoustic technology types, like, for example,
I feel like
ANTS?
there's one that you didn't mention that I feel like should be mentioned. Also, I feel like I'm kind of robot-y.
Not
Uh,
to me.
no, I'm looking okay?
Oh no, you're
Alright.
no, you are a slideshowy. Just disable the video and then enable it again on ping, and it should be fine. Ping, come on, ping, improve your bandwidth.
Yeah, it's weird.
All right,
Okay. But I feel like there's one that you didn't mention that I'm surprised you didn't, which
sure.
is like ANC. I feel like
Interesting.
ANC, and like I've only noticed it more and more, but the fact that it lowers the occlusion effect by lowering the acoustic impedance of the volume makes ANC headphones really convenient for when I'm like watching stuff. Like if I'm
Yeah,
eating lunch and like, chewing when you wear an IEM sucks. Um, but
walking when you're wearing an IEM sucks.
yeah, but like engaging transparency mode or
Yeah,
ANC makes that a lot less loud in your ear and like actually
yeah,
makes it, you know, easier for you to do other things.
yeah,
Um, and obviously the upside of it canceling out external noise and increasing your signal to noise ratio is like if it didn't have like potential negative externalities on your frequency response,
hmm
ANC would be like the easiest win of all time. And like even with those problems, it still kind of is. But
Well, yeah. Then we get into the woeful state of ANC headphones, and that's
yeah,
a
I do prefer ANC in my IEMs versus headphones. I feel like them having to deal with a consistently smaller volume does kind of work to their advantage a lot of the time.
even still. There's like one good ANC IEM. I shouldn't say one. I came across another one that I thought was actually not bad. Um, with
What was
its
it?
app integration, the Denon Pearl Pro, the default sound signature is awful, but like
Mm,
it has this, it has good, somewhat reasonable, I should say, not good, but somewhat reasonable customizability that can turn it into something that sounds okay.
that's cool.
Yeah, the
Yeah, you've
bar's
never
low,
mentioned it to me
but
before.
yeah, yeah, I've been listening to it lately. Again, I would not choose it. It has problems. I would choose the AirPods Pro 2, I think, generally over it still, largely because of fit. I think that the APP2 still fits better for most people and is a more convenient form factor, but it has a lot more customizability. So for
Yeah,
people who,
fair.
want that, that's where the APP2 just doesn't have it.
Yeah, but in my if we're not using driver technology, if I'm answering the question, what's the best acoustic technology in headphones? It's
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 A
ANC
and
and
C. Yeah.
transparency mode. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Fair. Interesting. We haven't also touched on other driver types as well, like AMTS or
Oh, you mean AMT
sorry, AMT and the
ribbon?
XMEMS and Ribbon and stuff like that.
Okay, well that's easy because none of those have any advantages.
So the thing I was gonna say with the interesting one to me there is actually AMT. It has a lot of disadvantages in headphones just because it's so huge. Like you have to you're basically taking folds, right? You're creating a bellows type system, and that somehow needs to go into the headphones. So you have to have a big structure there. Um, but I think one of the advantages there would be similar to the kinds of advantages that you get with um well, I was going to say planars more so than e-stats because the folds themselves, at least in headphones like the headphone 1 and headphone 2, are variable, and
Mm,
that's how they're able to tune it, essentially.
mm.
Um, but the advantage being that, like there's more high frequency potential, let's just say. And also I feel like I have to double check this, but I feel like it's also acoustically less or like there's less of that sort of occlusion with some of those than what you might get. I'm not sure if you've experienced that, but then you might get with other designs. Um, but I
Yeah,
need to double check this.
I would say I disagree with that characterization, actually. I think my
Okay.
main problem with the AMT designs is, like, they kind of have the downsides of all of them. Like, they don't have, like, enough moving mass or enough of, like just because of how the drivers are constructed, like, they don't resonate in the way that leads to at least in how they're typically constructed and implemented in headphones, like, very low free air resonance frequencies,
So they don't have that advantage.
right? So,
But they
because of
definitely
that,
have
they're
the
not like dynamic drivers where they kind of,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
have
Yeah.
that regardless of the open or regardless of the impedance of the front volume.
And they don't have the ultra low FS
And they don't have the ultra
front.
low
Yeah.
FS,
Yeah.
and they don't have the ultra low occlusion of the E-stats because usually
So
because you don't have the other 2 things, you have to have
what
a sealed front.
yeah, so what I'm interested in though is yeah, that actually is a big downside, I think, in
Yeah.
comparison to e-stats. But if you
Well, ESATs typically have it too, but it's just like the back is so
yeah,
open.
yeah, I
Like
know
the,
what you mean.
whereas the AMT, like the whole structure there is way less open than even I think planars.
So here's where I'm curious though, because if you look at the driver that the implementation of the headphone 1 is different from the headphone 2 in the sense that the headphone 2 has far less modal shit going on,
Mm.
and I have to imagine that that's also in part because of increased damping, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I have to
I've
imagine this is like
not looked inside of
but
either
that's
of
that
them.
yeah, me neither, and that's why but I like it could also potentially be because they got more precise with the variability of the folds, right? Like
Could be. I mean, it could also be like a heavier driver.
Yeah, I think they use
Yeah,
Captain for one of them. But anyways, I don't know enough about how that's actually implemented. As far
me
as like
neither.
what's going on with the rest of the acoustics. So
I just know that they're very big, very heavy, and I've yet to hear one that sounds like really
yeah,
good, you know?
yeah. The but I will say I think that the key thing there, at least this is how it is subjectively to me, is that it does tend to propagate treble in a unique way, in situ in ways that other headphones often don't. Whether this is a good thing, I think, is gonna be down to the individual, right? Um, and it's one of those things where it's like, if I'm EQing things, if I'm gonna EQ an AMT headphone, either the treble is good or it isn't. Because trying to EQ the in situ, like again, not from the graph, but like when I'm actually listening to it, trying to get into the fine grain shit for FR at my eardrum with those above like
Nightmare.
6 kilohertz is a nightmare.
Yeah.
so I don't bother.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they propagate treble differently is a good way to put it. Um,
In a unique manner.
so
Like, often more, like, I find at
the
least, but
issue is we don't have actually many examples for this type of
yeah.
driver implementation. We literally only have 2, maybe 2.5 if you count Headphone 2 and Headphone 2 GT as different
Oh,
headphones.
yeah.
Um, we only have 2 implementations of that driver type. I find it pretty tough to make any robust conclusions based on that, especially again because I haven't looked at the driver
There
structures
is also
themselves.
the Gold Planar one, which was not great.
Never heard it, never seen it, have
Not
no desire to do either ever again.
yeah. Um, okay, so then other oh, yeah, what was the
Ribbon?
last there's Ribbon, and then there's, what the digital
MEMS?
one? MEMS, yeah.
Do you say digital one?
It's what in my head, it's digital, but it's a wafer, basically.
Mhm.
Um, let's do Ribbon first.
Okay. Um, I so again, this is kind of like ESTAT where I absolutely don't know enough to like say concretely. I just know that at least the versions of it I've seen are all extremely hard to power.
Mhm,
Um, and it seems like fragility is also an issue there, which is true of microphones, like ribbon microphones as well.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't really know enough about how the actual driver itself and its motion is affected by the construction of the ribbon itself.
Well, isn't it magnets on either side of like a I don't know what the material is that they use for
Yeah,
this, but yeah, and then that I mean, like, my understanding is that the main disadvantage there, the obstacle that you need to overcome with those types of things is the harmonic distortion problem. Um, but
maybe.
I'm not aware of any like key advantages or disadvantages with respect to modal behavior in ribbons, compared to say planars or other transducer types.
Yeah,
So
I don't know.
yeah, but again, it's another one of those problems where, like you said, like we don't have that many examples to go on in
It's
headphones.
literally just the raw stuff as far as
Yeah,
I'm aware. And then like that one synaptic SE1 or synaptic SE1,
yeah.
which is probably one of the worst headphones I've ever put on my head.
We should
Um,
we should we should make one. We should make a ribbon headphone. I don't think they're that difficult to
yeah, I
create.
mean, as you say, it's just like a film between 2
Yeah,
magnets, but
2 magnet bars, right? Or
um,
like 2 on either side of like a
yeah, it just
armature.
almost certainly wouldn't come out good.
That's okay.
That is okay. That is okay. It would just be fun to do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we should do it.
yeah.
Um, then, the MEMS, and this is one where I think you have more opinions than I do.
No. No, no, no.
Well, you don't like MEMS, right?
So I have a specific I will confess that I have a specific bias against them because we went to a I think it was right before one of Sean's talks at Can Gym New York
Oh, yeah.
2 years ago. XMEMS was giving a presentation where they were like 100% marketing feeding into like the time domain BS.
Wait. It wasn't X-Mems. It was, that was the MDAX folks.
Right, but it was a representative
It
of XMEMS
but it was
giving
yeah,
that part of the
exactly.
presentation.
Yeah.
Or
No,
no, actually no,
one was
I think it
Jason
was Head giving the presentation, but the XMEMS guy was in the
was
audience
there. That's right.
and
And they had
like
sort of, like, partnered up to
yeah.
talk like, that was part of the talk somehow and roped into, like, it scores really
Yeah.
well but, like, if that was to do with that one the creative,
The creative Arvana
TWS.
Ace 2 and its MEMS driver.
Like, if anybody's heard that, it's really bad. Really, really, really bad.
It's
So,
so
it's just
gross.
one of those things where it's like like, this is scoring really well in this thing, right? And people are citing it as being because of this particular driver technology. It's like, that is a marketing ploy that
Yeah, and I think that kind of enfolds all of MEMS.
yeah.
It's just a marketing ploy. Like they're literally just playing on the fact that audiophiles already have an expectation for the fastest possible motion is equivalent directly to resolution or
Yeah.
technicalities or whatever they want to call it. But for one, that's not the case. Even if MEMS do have a higher frequency extension that none of us are able to hear anyway. As drivers, they're not very good drivers. Like they are quite fragile. Um, they're quite, I mean, at least relative to the other driver types, which are more mature and can be implemented a variety of different ways. At times, quite a bit more expensive to produce, depending on what kind of MEMS driver you're making. Um, but also, the most commonly implemented types of MEMS drivers tend to have basically all of their SPL, like all of their sound bunched up at one very specific resonance frequency, which tends to be like somewhere in the 10 to 20 kilohertz region, which is why most of the time you see them, like if you see someone using like an XMEMS Montara, for example, and they're using the top firing one, it's only ever used as a tweeter because it's literally just adding 12K to the system and that's it. Now, there are other types of MEMS drivers where, like, if you get a similar kind of Montara driver, but you get a side firing one, you do get a different profile. But then you have to understand that you also have all of these power requirements that are frankly just unnecessary for, or should be unnecessary to get the SPL at the eardrum that you want to get, because you can get that SPL with a balanced armature or a dynamic
Sure.
driver. And personally, for a portable device, which is most of the things that MEMS are actually implemented in, like I don't want a separate power source. Like I don't want to deal with that.
It just feels like one of those other things where it's like for the inconvenience and the expense, you have like a
Yeah, no, that's
separate thing.
exactly it. But that's the thing. Audiophiles are primed to want stuff like that,
Yeah.
where the inconvenience adds to the experience for them, which isn't invalid. And I don't want to say is like a bad way to enjoy music more, but it it just does not cohere as a offering you should spend more money to get,
So
right?
here's where I am. My brain goes to this a little bit with MEMS, which is here we have the current versions of products with MEMS in them, and I would say if this technology is to take off at all, these current products are not good representations of what it should be, and also that this technology would currently be considered in its infancy. Who knows if it's even going to grow out of its infancy, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
it
I mean,
won't.
it just has so many other issues. Like
But could you see a
they're
scenario
like BA
where
stiff, so like they have no leak tolerance, right? So
Mhm.
like
But could you see a scenario where it improves to a degree where it would actually be useful to implement?
Um, well, yeah, in the way that they're traditionally implemented outside of IEMs, which is micro speakers and microphones. Like,
Just not for
yeah.
headphones
Well, yeah.
or
No, they're
IEMs.
they're not they're not great for headphones.
Yeah, yeah. Um. So
Yeah,
okay.
like hold on.
So
I will say in a true wireless IEM, if for some reason you want a MEMS driver, that's fine because like you can just put the active electronics in the IEM like the Arvana Ace 2 and Bob's Your Uncle. But
yeah.
I've yet to see anything to suggest that they are actually categorically better than a balanced armature,
Oh no. Well,
which
you have tons of things to suggest that all the audiophiles who listen to them and report that they're faster. was it? Wasn't it Tam who was asking me about that? Like he wanted.
the Arvana
Yeah.
Ace 2.
Yeah. I think he
Yeah,
said that to me, right?
Tam is a pox on this hobby. You don't want anything anything Tam cosigns, is at least
Hey,
90% evil.
shout outs to Tam.
Shouts out to Tam. I love my buddy.
um. Okay. BAs. We didn't cover BAs. BAs are basically, I think of it as like a springboard or a diving board. Uh, the advantage is it's you can put lots of them into small spaces. The disadvantage of is high harmonic distortion and odd order harmonic distortion.
Depending on the one you get and how it's implemented, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I will say I think BA is probably like, well, for one, it should never be used in over-ear headphones. Let's just
never,
get that out of the way.
never.
There's no reason to do that. But in IEMs, I actually think they're vastly underrated. Um, Both in terms of like they're using hybrid arrays with
you
crossovers and
can
stuff like that, but also like as a single driver in an IEM, I
Mhm.
think the humble BA still has implementations that are worth looking into. The main downside with them is that yeah, they're so leak intolerant. They just don't do bass without a complete
Which is why you
complete
get
coil.
hybrids or sealed BA, the horror. Uh,
Yeah. Um, yeah. Venting good. So
yeah,
BA is not great for that. But
yeah,
as Josh says, BA is good. You just have to know how to use them. I
yeah,
would fully co-sign that take.
yeah. So as far as the non-transducer related stuff, like the other types of acoustic technology, which I keep referencing, but we haven't gotten into, uh, favorites, least favorites. What are your thoughts on some of them that exist, especially some of the patented ones from various different brands?
I mean, I think if we start at one of the most basic ones, it would probably be like Helmholtz resonators,
Hmm.
right? Like just a single Helmholtz resonator, like the Sennheiser HD 800S. I think in an over ear design, what's up?
Mark Ryan says you can't spell based without BAs.
So true. You also can't spell bad though.
Yeah, there you go.
Uh, so Josh putting a questionable take in chat. Um, Helmholtz or pipe resonators are goaded. I would say they are often misused.
Mm.
Um, but they can be very, very cool and very, very beneficial to the acoustic system you're working with.
I think at the very least, it's cooler when things are designed that or tuned that way than using other like using components and stuff like that. Even though the components make it far easier, and the end result isn't any different.
Yeah. So like,
Oh, there actually is an advantage though. Well, a theoretical advantage, and it's that component tolerances are not as tight as we would like, so that this is a source of potential unit variation where Helmholtz resonator might not be. It's not necessarily the case that it wouldn't be for other reasons, but that wouldn't be the source of it.
right. Um, so a common example in headphones is the HD 800S, and personally, I don't really feel like that's all that great. um, like I get why they do it. I I've never really had a huge issue with that peak appearing on my head. And we know that the magnitude of that peak and the location of that peak can shift based on the volume of air the ear is placed in and how the
Sure.
driver is positioned relative to that ear.
Mhm.
So I feel like kind of narrow band solutions in an area of the FR where anatomical variance is so wide and so much wider than the narrowness of the Q of the acoustic filter they're putting in. I feel like that's not a great thing, and I feel like it gets regarded as a better solution than it actually is. The second part of that is that most of the people that aren't like Sennheiser are just straight up not calculating the right values for their Helmholtz resonators.
Oh,
Um,
so this is a theoretical issue, not a technology issue. Like basically, they're getting the
yeah,
wrong.
I mean, I don't think the technology has many
Yeah,
downsides, frankly. Like
yeah,
it's a fairly simple thing, and it doesn't seem like it would commit much else than the change in the one band it's targeting.
hmm,
Um, I just think it's more often with the implementation and when it's used,
yeah.
and it being used incorrectly a lot of the times, or in situations where just damping would be better.
How do you feel about quarter wavelength resonator masks?
Is that the Meze thing?
Yeah.
I
So
actually,
well, this is actually just like the question is more like how do we feel about AMTS, right? Because
yeah,
um,
I mean,
I just like the acronym QUIRM. Does it
it's
make you squirm?
tough
Do you squirm
because
for QUIRM?
actually, like, I mean, like the AMTS stuff we see in Dan's designs,
Hmm.
I think tend to work better for me than they do you guys. Like you guys being the other
Well,
members of the writing
right.
staff.
So
Um,
it really depends on the headphone for me, like the way the rest of the headphone is designed. I have several issues with it generally, which is that it takes up quite a bit of space inside the cup, meaning that for some of them, it actually brushes up against the pinna. The For whatever reason, the exception there for me is like the E3 seems to function a lot better that for me than like the stealth or the expanse or the and like both for that, but also for the way the sound propagates as a function of the AMTS, right? So um effectively like for folks who are unaware, AMTS, I think of it as like a sophisticated waveguide resonator clump. Like it's got a whole bunch of different things that have been sort of modeled um to create this structure that gets placed in front of the driver to the joke that I've I've run with in the past, and it's not technically true, but it's kind of like turning a headphone into an IEM. Like it's kind of
Hmm.
because you're tuning it on that side of things in a very specific or precise manner, the way you can with IEMs. Um, but in my experience, it's been a lot more variable. And certainly, I don't get at my eardrum, and I know for Blaine it's the same way too. Like we don't get at our eardrums at all the way they graph on standard test fixtures. Um, at the time we were doing the Gross, but for the Stealth and the Expanse, I also don't get that for the Noir. Like it doesn't, or no, sorry, Noir X. It doesn't
Mhm.
propagate for me there either. But for whatever reason, the E3 does. Like I did this with manual sweeps, and I was like, yeah, this actually works. Like for how it measures versus how I hear it. Didn't mean it was free from issues, right? It just meant that
Mhm.
like it was a lot closer to. It was more predictable from the result that I got.
Yeah, I think the downsides you bring up, kind of the ergonomic, uh, kind of how it affects where your ear can be in a headphone, but
Yeah.
also, yeah, the variability versus
So I
measurement stuff,
I
I
actually
think
have like
broadly.
there's a nuance there for me, and I'm curious what your thoughts are because I don't
What's
know
up?
if this is true. But so when you put that structure in front of a driver, right? In this case, we're talking planars. Um, that structure is now required to sit at a certain angle, whatever the angle that was created by the rest of
Mhm,
the headphone. We're talking here like pad design, usually like thinner at the front, thicker at the back. So there's
mhm,
a specific angle that it's now meant to sit at, right? But
mhm.
we know that in practice, when people are wearing over ear headphones, that angle is not, it's not
Yeah, it's not
universal.
fixed. The
Yeah,
dimensions of people's
exactly.
temples and
It's a
sides of
little
heads
bit
are
different,
different.
right? And what I'm wondering is if this is a force multiplier for variability, right? For, with the AMTS, that you would have less reason to worry about that with that kind of tuning methodology in an IEM, because with an IEM, the
There's
angle
only one
isn't
dimension.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering is like maybe this is less to do with the AMTS like specifically and more to do with the angle that it's sitting on my head, causing sound to propagate very differently, based on the way that the AMTS is hitting my pinna, right? Like as it along the path to the eardrum.
Yeah, so I can't say for sure how much of an effect that has, but, like, so the thing Constantine told me about, like, the thing I was talking about earlier, how, like, the
Yeah.
shape of the wave hitting the ear is, a contiguous large plane with a planar. The
Mhm.
AMTS is obviously undoing all of that, right? So instead, you're
Yeah.
getting not one contiguous piece of air, but
You get a
a
whole
bunch
bunch of
of
little,
different
yeah.
little bursts of air
Yeah.
through this membrane, which, I think just makes it more likely that positional variance would be larger, right?
Mhm.
Because you're getting unequal distribution of energy traveling across, admittedly, a very small distance where like these timing differences shouldn't matter a ton. Um, but it's less about, I mean, just in the way I'm thinking about it, less about the timing and phase and stuff like that, and more about just like the distribution of the energy itself at a different point relative to that.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, this
so like the positional variation you're talking about.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if the angling helps or hurts there. Um,
Well, at the very least, I have the feeling that the angling makes it more variable across it is what's responsible for it being or could be
I guess
responsible.
we just don't know if that variability is steering it towards or away from the
Sure.
HRTF of the listener and like the
Sure.
native ear effects of that listener.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the other factor there to me would be because even in best case scenarios, we can't. It's a struggle to isolate um, things like acoustic impedance from pinna proximity when we're talking about variability across heads. So it's or like and positional variation.
I mean,
It's
we
really
can come up with some things
I think
to
we
run some
can, yeah.
tests,
We can
but
run some tests, yeah. And we probably should. I think that that
yeah,
would
with
be
Dan's designs, it would be very hard, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. Could be,
Um,
and that's what I'm saying is because it uses
yeah,
this really sophisticated waveguide resonator thing. It's like, how would we isolate that?
yeah.
um, so
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I would be very interested to see because the way Dan has it implemented now, where it kind of sits between the driver and the ear,
mhm.
um, the reason I mean, I don't know that this is the reason why he did this, but to me, when you're working within that kind of that very short distance between the driver and the ear, you only have like wave behavior like above a certain frequency, right? So you're only getting like like what the length mode or the half wave of
Sure.
that
Yeah,
would
yeah,
still
yeah,
be
yeah.
a pretty high frequency, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like if you want to tune that stuff, you do need to have it interrupt that length with whatever resonators and anti-resonators you want. Whereas I think if he was kind of tuning the rest of the stuff underneath whatever length based frequency cutoff there is, um, he might be able to put those resonators like elsewhere in the cup. Like the
Mm.
Hi-Fi for All Dahlia
Oh, I see.
has that
Yeah.
resonator ring around it with a bunch of little resonators that resonated around 3.5 kilohertz, which is not super high, and I think longer than the length mode would be between the driver and the ear of a typical headphone. But I do wonder what something like Dan's AMTS would be like if it were implemented in places other than directly between
So
your ear and the cup. Because
decentralized away from that section where
yeah,
it's
like I
propagating.
would be very interested to see like what resonators may be built into the underside that faces
Mhm.
the driver of
Mhm.
the pad.
And this is the kind of like we were talking earlier about how, planars are not as mature in their sort of instantiation as what you get with like moving coil headphones. I think this would be the kind of thing that would make it that would basically, be the growing up, right? Because it's like,
Could
you
be,
know,
yeah.
it it's basically doing the kinds of tuning tactics that that we've already seen in moving coil stuff like the HD800S, for example.
Yeah. It's
Um,
just the thing I just posited may not work because
yeah, who knows?
yeah. Yeah, like I don't know if just adding an anti-resonance to the air volume is enough to
Sure.
interrupt the like length-based spike one would get from
Well,
the
yeah,
wave interference. It might, and if it does, then like I would be very interested to see what something like that where the resonators are not in between the ear and the
yeah,
driver, um, how that could be perceived. Oh,
yeah.
High Five for All is actually in the chat.
What up?
And yes, so that answers, I think, what's his face's question.
It says DCA has those side ear pad resonators described and pictured in their AMTS patent. Interesting.
Mhm.
So maybe
Yeah,
that's
so someone was asking
something they want to do.
for a teardown of the AMTS system, but all of that stuff should be
Yeah.
available online. Like you
Dan's
should be
pretty
able to find
public
that.
about the technology, right? So it's not like it's a
Yeah.
yeah. He's got
Yeah.
it patented, so he's all good there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um okay, so other types of I mean to me the big one is um passive filters,
Ah,
you
but
know.
is that an acoustic technology? I mean, it has an acoustic effect, but
No, but it has an effect, and it's one that I think that open back planar. So there's two things. I think open back planars should be designed more the way that the Sundara was designed, potentially, which is
in
that
terms of what?
there's a leak between the baffle and the side of the cup
So
to
you
create
want an integrated leak, but with a larger or low FS
yeah, I
driver?
think that would be really a really interesting way of doing it. I mean, the
Yeah.
other way that they've done it is with the Aria Organic, which is not that way. They've done it that actually is a modal feature.
Yeah, I was gonna say I
Um,
do not like that that approach.
with the modal using it, yeah. And I don't know how intentional that was, but
Yeah, I don't either. And frankly, I think like a lot of the reviews of it, like treating that as a base shelf was like, no, it's
I mean,
just in the right spot. You guys are just Harmon brains.
it's not a big like
No, it's not a
base
base
bump. It's
shelf.
just like a
It's
little contour. That's it.
yeah.
Yeah. So like the overall bass to treble delta is like pretty similar to the other ones. Well, I would say it's brighter. There's more treble on the organic, but anyways, yeah, it's like a little bit more modal. Um, but no, I think either having it be done in open back front seal planar is more like the way that the Sundara does it with intent. Again, I don't know how intentional, but with a integrated leak between. Well, I suppose it could also be between the baffle and the pad, but there's something cool about the way that they do it there, where basically it's like there's a gap between the baffle and the cup. Um,
On the Sundara.
on the Sundara, yeah, which incurs a little bit
Yeah,
the
or the
resonant
FT1
frequency.
Pro.
Yes, though the problem with the FT1 Pro is that it is excursion limited, meaning that is not
Yeah, no,
necessarily a
I'm
good
just
thing.
saying in terms of the leak.
The leak itself. Yeah. So I think that more of that is a good thing because it does give you an acoustic way of adding a bit more bass presence for some of these, open back front seal planers that would otherwise have fully flat linear bass extension. Um, like for people who want more bass presence, and I think that's generally true for most people. This is not a stupid way of doing it. It's actually a clever way of doing it, I think. But we haven't really seen it instantiated that well. First of all, we haven't seen it instantiated like hardly at all. But in the examples that we have seen it instantiated, it's also not as well as it could be, I think. So more there would be better. But the other side of it is I do feel that with open back headphones of any technology type, well, certainly dynamics and planars, there is just a lot more opportunity for passive filters to add a bass shelf, like what you get with the Sierra and actually Dan has this with the Expanse, right? So I think that's smart, and the reason like it makes sense to do because the vast majority of amplifiers or outputs of any kind are ultra low impedance, meaning that you're not going to be messing with the response. You disagree?
Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
think maybe the stuff that like Reddit audiophiles are buying are mostly low impedance, but
Okay.
like
Most sources should be output low output impedance.
should be. I feel like we need years of progress before that
I
gets
don't know, man.
achieved.
Every month there's a new amplifier that comes out, low output impedance.
Okay, the thing is, I'm thinking of it past the audiophile sphere, like where
Are you thinking
people are
about like
reasonable. I'm talking about like pro audio, like
yeah,
interfaces.
where it wouldn't
Most
be.
of them have
Yeah,
an
yeah.
output impedance above 10.
Yeah, but
Like
those
it's
people
so
like do
annoying.
they really matter? I mean, like I don't know.
Yes, that's like most of the it's like
Well, okay,
most of the wired headphone
then
using
they
world
just
is studio or
then
live
no,
sound
then then
people.
then they just don't get bass. That's just, like
Or
that's
they get too much.
or they get too much, yeah. Hey, I'm
No,
fine with
I
it, right? That's a trade-off that, they
I'm
can just
not.
deal
So
with
like
that.
one of Blaine and I's
No,
friends who
like,
goes
okay,
by
hold on.
Penny
I
Q is a live sound person who can't use most IEMs because they have
They
nonlinear
have the yeah,
impedances.
yeah, and, no, they can just, I mean, that's fine. That's not a big, concession that they have to make there. They should use other headphones. But, like, you can have you just don't market it towards those people, right? Like, here's my criticism of the industry generally, and it has been for a long time. One of my criticisms is that, like, the headphone industry or the headphone world and the, like, source equipment world is 2 ships passing in the night, right? Like you don't to the point where now this one is irrelevant. Like you don't need DACs and amps anymore the way that maybe it may have made sense in the
I mean,
past.
if you're gonna have headphones with passive filters, you
You
arguably do
and
because of the sensitivity
that's
loss
that's exactly why I think it should be done. So that now you actually
to
have a
keep
reason to
amp and
use.
DAC makers alive.
Yes, yes. If the industry wants to progress and keep, and stay alive, right? Like you
I
need
don't
to
know that
be able
I'd
to
call
work
this
together.
progress, but okay.
I think it is because not only that, you also get better potentially better tunings or tunings that people may like more. It all depends on like what good is there as far as the actual FR effect that you're, introducing. But there is a potential for improved sound quality as a function of people now having to use DACs and amps or like specifically amps because of the SPL loss that you get from passive filters. Anyways, that's my soapbox. Passive filter's
Someone
good.
someone just said to bring gadgetry tech in the shower, please.
What?
It was a typo, but it's a good one. I would need to get gadgetry tech's consent to do that first. We're close, but not that close. True. Um, sorry, are there any other technologies you feel like, I mean, there's, like, crossovers. There's, like,
I mean, like,
which I guess is just more passive filtering, but
yeah,
kind of differently than I think you were thinking about it, and more typically implemented because IEMs exist.
yeah. There's nothing that jumps out to me off the top of my head as like additional things that are worth talking about.
I mean, chat brings up kind of the one we're kind of intentionally ignoring,
What
which
DSP?
is yeah, which is the best one,
But
which
yeah,
is
the
yeah,
DSP. Like,
the one with the least downsides and the most upside,
well,
but
I actually do think that things. I mean, to get to back to the active side of things, like leakage compensation is huge and should be in
that's a good
every
one.
ANC headphones. Like,
That's a
there's
good one.
no, like, I, that. Okay, I was ranting about this earlier to Griffin, but like, the high end ANC market is
Poopy.
is really bad because they can't compete with the Apples and whoever else in this respect. When it comes to things like leakage compensation and some of the highly sophisticated stuff that's going on there with regards to the tunings, like with regards to like the in situ responses, right? Um, and I really wish that that was something that they could compete with, or that they could do. They could implement. I will say on some of them where I've introduced, like actually I was doing this with the Batiste MG. I was testing to see if it had any kind of leakage compensation.
I assume it
I,
does.
so when I introduce a leak, the bass does go up
Yeah,
quite a bit.
yeah.
So either there is, or the resonance frequency is so low that, or not
No,
low, but like
it's
I
definitely
have
not
to
the resonance
assume,
frequency. No, no.
yeah,
So you know how when you were testing between and I don't know if you posted this measurement anywhere yet, but you were testing between ANC on and off, or like the different
yeah,
modes of
and it's
ANC, and you were
identical,
getting
yeah,
the same FR. That's
yeah.
exactly what's happening. It's just
It's compensating
it's
for
compensating for
whatever,
the change in
yeah,
impedance. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not
And
like that change that we're
it's not a
talking
head
about
sensor
isn't a
necessarily.
leak compensation
Yeah, yeah,
as much
yeah.
as it's an impedance
Impedance
compensation.
compensation, yeah, which is still smart to do. Like,
Absolutely. I mean,
but
it's the only way to do ANC correctly.
mhm, yeah. So for all of those, like, I did that video of the high end. Like, I was testing a whole bunch of different ones in the high end, and like none of them had any sort of. It was like this may as
Mm,
well be a closed back headphone.
mm.
I shouldn't say none, but I was struggling to find where it would have leakage compensation. Um, so
KZO asks, what do you mean by impedance compensation? Okay, so for those who might not know, when we talk about acoustic impedance, we're essentially talking about the stiffness of the air, typically in the front volume being the air volume that's typically trapped between your ear and the driver of the headphone. So the part that the pad closes in, that
mhm.
air volume in there, that chamber that your ear is in, the stiffness of that air volume largely determines how much SPL or volume under 1 kilohertz, but mostly like under 500 hertz, can actually be propagated. When you turn on ANC on an ANC headphone, that lowers the acoustic impedance and lowers the stiffness of the air, so less bass can actually propagate. A well designed ANC headphone will compensate for that by boosting bass equivalent to what's lost when you lower the impedance or the stiffness of the air in that volume. So when we're saying impedance compensation, we're basically talking about the boost that you put in to offset the loss due to the stiffness of the air changing in that volume.
What's surprising to me with the Batiste platform is how precise that seems to be.
Yeah, it's very well done,
Yeah.
which is good.
Um, yeah.
That's another point in its favor, and it's one of the things that most of the audiophile options I find do not get right.
Man, it was the Bayers I think I was testing that was like,
The
this
Avento,
may as well be a closed back headphone.
yeah,
It doesn't, you know. I mean, they might be doing it to some extent, but it just wasn't good, you know. Um,
yeah, and the Moondrop Edge doesn't do it at all.
doesn't do it, no. And I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure that I didn't test this specifically with the Solitaire T. I should double check that. But a lot of the higher end ones didn't do it either. So,
yeah.
um, but none of them were as sophisticated as the AirPods Max that I've tested. As far as like the the leak that you get. Still, I would say that leakage compensation of some kind is a very useful thing, and it's to the point where like if done well, there's no reason to use a passive closeback because like that would just take over. Stop with this. This is I got to do that. Wait, I love the DT770 because of the low mid scoop.
So true. So
You know
true.
what I don't like about. I don't know where this comes from. This is just like randomly made up.
It's just the people know. The people
Uh,
have been following you for a while, and they know your taste. They've got you pegged.
don't say that.
Jesus Christ! All right, what were you gonna say? Move on.
No, let's just move on. Let's move on to the next
Oh,
topic.
okay.
I
You
think.
can.
Yeah. On that
So
disappointment.
this was your topic. So I figured you had something you wanted to talk about with this next one.
Well, actually, I was curious. Should we do this one or should we do sound impressions of it? Should we put up a poll for sound for? Because I have a bunch of headphones that I want to
Yeah,
give
no, you should
live impressions of.
put up the poll really quick. I'm actually gonna go get another
Okay.
seltzer. I'll be right back.
All right. Let's see if I can do this here. Another seltzer. Wow. Start a poll. Okay. So I have a bunch of Kiwi Ears headphones here. Closebacks. I think one in ear. So I'm going to ask you guys which one you would like live impressions of. And the options are, we have the Kiwi Ears Athea. This is if you guys can see, this is a planar and a dynamic driver hi-fi wooden over-ear headphone. I haven't taken any of these out of the box yet, so I don't know how they sound. Then there's also the Kiwi Ears Aventus, which is a dynamic wireless headphone. Then there is the Kiwi Ears Ardor, which is an ANC headphone that they do. And then there is. By the way, if there is an embargo on any of this, let me know before I talk about it.
No,
I don't think there is. Then there's the Kiwi Ears Aether, which is a large planar IEM. Interesting. So the question is, which one should we do? So hold on, I'll put this here. Kiwi Ears Ardor, Kiwi Ears Athea.
So the Athea is the multi-driver headphone,
Yes.
right?
Kiwi Ears. What was the other one? Aether.
Don't ask me, dog.
I am.
Bye, Tommy.
Bye, Tommy. And then the last one was the Aventus. I should probably put what they are. This is the dual driver. This is Ardor is the IM? No, Ardor is the ANC.
Are there two ANC ones?
Oh,
one
sorry.
One of them is going to be RGB, and one of them is going to be not
Sorry,
RGB.
the Kiwi Ears Aventus is the DJ ANC headphone. For DJs, okay. ANC. And then what's the Ardor again? The Ardor is just the wireless one. Yeah, it's just ANC, just regular ANC. All right, let's see what people want live impressions of.
You put the poll up?
Yep.
Okay.
I think. My hope is that people pick the. I'm gonna bias the poll here. My hope is that people pick the Athea just because it'll be easier to test.
That's the multi-driver headphone, right?
Yeah. It's a planar and dynamic, and it has wood cups just like this.
Cool. I will.
So before
I measured that on 5128 at the show. James brought one over.
Oh, okay. I do not have high expectations because I mean, like dual driver with dynamic and planar doesn't seem like. I'm
not going to say anything.
Okay. Well, I mean that's already influencing how I'm going to feel about it. Your general demeanor is causing skepticism.
Sorry, I will demean less.
Um, those here. So far, literally nobody. Wait, what? Okay, hold on a second. Let's let it run for a little bit. Let's do the other topic while this poll is running. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Wait, but which one do you want to do?
I'm waiting for the poll to finish.
Right, I'm saying which topic do you want to do? Do you
Oh,
want to do the industry?
uh, up to you.
They did your topics, dog. I mean, I figured for any of these you had something you wanted to talk about.
No.
Okay.
I
I
mean,
mean, we can
I
touch on the industry one because I think it'll probably be the shortest
the
out of
shortest.
any of
Okay.
them.
So
Yeah.
the topic is what the audio industry isn't telling you that you probably should know.
Yeah.
Um, my general sense of this, the thing that comes to mind has to do a little bit with price tags versus means, right? So like the a general assumption for a lot of people is that hey, this is a headphone that costs $3,000, therefore it is more good or more better for things like detail and resolution and soundstage or whatever thing that they care about. The real reason why a lot of these things cost so much, regardless of their and this has nothing to do with snake oil because yeah, that's obviously an issue, but like um the reason why many of these headphones do cost so much is because they are produced at such low volumes that this is the business model that that many of these companies in the industry have to pursue, right? It's not possible to produce these at large, for them at least, at such at ideal volumes to be able to make it affordable. Um, and that's also why you see from the manufacturing side of things like certain choices when it comes to the materials. Um, the people often make this mistake of being like, well, the material cost for this product is like extremely low, therefore, it's not actually worth whatever this is. But the reality is that that's like not really relevant. Like the material cost for any of this stuff is never going to be proportional to what you pay. And really, this has much more to do with okay, uh, you know, I have this much that I can invest into the production of whatever this product is. That means I have to sell it with this margin in order to be able to recuperate costs. And as this relates to customers, like people who are potentially buying these products, it really should factor. It really, the reason I think people should know about this is because we should be hedging against some of the default assumptions that we have when we're looking to potentially buy these things. Um, which is to say that hey, this is priced at this higher price tag. Um, if if everything was equal and the production scale for all these headphones was the same, in theory, something that costs a lot more could potentially have a lot more R&D into its acoustics, into the whatever else is going on. But that's not the case, right? It's often not the case. It's often the complete opposite. That these higher price tag products have less R&D that's gone into them because they just didn't have the means to do so. Um, so that would be my big thing that uh, things about the industry that they're not telling you that people should probably know.
Yeah, mine would have been some version of that too. Like, um, obviously, a manufacturer has no responsibility or obligation to tell you kind of their margins of production, just as a retailer has no obligation to tell you that for
Mhm.
their
Like,
sales margins or
yeah,
anything like that. But I do think it would be of value to the customer to know that information, but also for the customer to know what all actually goes into that margin as a percentage, right? Because as you say, for most things, the materials cost is not the primary cost. Um, there are many other rents that are extracted, is what I'll say.
yeah. And like actually, Douglas did a great video on this. On I think
He
he
did,
put this
but
on his
even
channel, the
even
Thinking
his
Mega.
is a specific scenario
Yeah,
where because he's working at such a low volume, he, for example, doesn't have to pay for warehousing or logistics, which is a significant cost.
yep, yep.
um, so it's something for people to think about and just kind of always remember that when you're shopping for audio products, um, yes, the prices might seem crazy at times, um, but there are often times when every part of it actually makes perfect sense, and you frankly won't know most of the time which is which,
Yeah.
outside of vibes, because you're just never gonna have a manufacturer telling you that.
Yeah. And I think in light of that, like the advice is like really we cannot be applying scrutiny to the whole question of proportional value with any of this stuff because you just don't know. You
Yeah,
have
I
to
mean,
be
you can compare value between products because, like, at the end of the day, you're only spending whatever amount of money you're spending,
of course, yeah.
and we already know that the price doesn't scale proportionally
Yeah,
to quality. So
and but also the price doesn't scale proportionally with R&D, right? Or like
yeah,
anything
or any of the
anything.
work that was done
Yeah.
behind the headphone. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Or material cost or anything to
yeah.
do with it.
So if anything, that this points to price probably being like something people should absolutely consider as a primary factor for like the range of headphones that are entertaining,
Mhm.
but not actually an important factor for what headphone they ultimately pick. Like
Yeah,
it should very much so be about the other things, and then if it works out that it's cheaper, great. It often does.
yeah.
Um, I in the last video I just put out, the three headphones one song video. I had some people asking me
No cups.
why I chose like two like $300 $400 headphones and then like a $1,600 headphone. And
Yeah,
I feel like if you're asking me that, you didn't watch the video, because in the video it's pretty clear that the MM500 lost,
yeah,
right? I chose it because it was another, like, I wanted to have two neutral options and then one kind of colored option, but
yeah.
it's funny how that works out.
With that said, though, like I do think there's. By the way, just have to shout out Rob Hawk. Earwax's EQ for poor audio for the poor audiophile. um, but yeah, I do think it's worth keeping in mind that like that there are certain things that you are more likely to find in the high end price tags, like with the ability to spend more,
Mhm.
and but also I think that as far as like it relates to products that exist, whether we're talking like the budget stuff or the high end stuff, there are going to be trends, right? So like I actually think that like when you look at the IEM market, it actually makes perfect sense that you get a lot more generic tunings the more down market you go, and more esoteric and specific tunings the more high end you go. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of like a good example because that industry is like there's a churn with that industry that is sort of amplified, and it's an interesting microcosm of like the high end of the landscape of like high end to low end. And you can, well, it's maybe a macrocosm, I don't know, but you get what I mean. That like it reveals something interesting about the way that these products are targeting different groups, and it makes perfect sense to me. Like if you're looking for something very specific for the kind of sound signature that you want, you're probably more likely to find that um, the further away from the known good segment where everyone's trying to achieve a more similar, almost homogenous kind of sound signature. Again, like what you find in IEMs when you go down market.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else quickly?
The Athea wand, dude.
Okay. I'm gonna end the poll. Like for whatever reason. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we got Athea at 65%. We got the Ardor at 13%. We got the Ether at 13%, and the Aventus DJ ANC at 6%. All right. Let's
I'm glad to see bias against DJs showing up in the poll results.
yeah,
Good
fuck some
stuff,
DJ.
chat.
There's some DJ in the chat be like, you bastard. You're gonna hate us. um there were actually some interesting comments as well. I saw earlier. Maybe if you want to go through some of those as it relates to this, that might be worth.
Oh, you saw things about the Athea?
Yeah, well, no, just your video just disappeared.
Sorry about that.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, so Moondog says, "What about research testing knowledge behind certain products?" Do you want to?
Well,
Do
that's
you
kind
want
of
to?
what you said, right?
Yeah,
Where,
yeah,
you know, The cost does not indicate how much research was put into a product.
Yeah. What do we have for the connectors here? Is this 3.5 millimeter? All right, so you get, first of all, case. Let's show the inside of the case.
It's
By the way,
a decent case.
How much are these headphones? Do you want to look it up real quick?
Yeah, I'll let you know.
All right. Cable. Ooh, weird.
Oh my god. No, that's not what I'm laughing at. Can you show me the cable again? Sorry. Okay.
It's weird.
I was saying, oh my god, at the cost.
Okay.
I almost don't want to tell you.
Don't tell me. This cable, it's like some of it is like cloth, and then some of it is like catheter. It's that cloth catheter hybrid that we all look for in our headphones. All right, I'm gonna show you guys the headphone here. Let's take a look at this. It's got wood on the cups. This wood does feel nicer than the wood that's on the FT1. That's actually my biggest complaint about the FT1 is that the wood doesn't feel amazing. But this wood does feel more, I don't know, cromulent, real. Cromulent's not the right word. It's got some nice yoky arm stuff. A little bit of movement there, you know. It's got tilt, swivel, and it's got a suspension strap. Pad opening is not. Why is my camera doing just not able to focus on this? What the hell? You guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Pads are also removable. I'll take them off after listening though. Okay. Any other things from chat?
No, people are just kind of making jokes.
Making jokes. All right, making jokes and taking names. Yeah, that's a stupid joke. All
right. Nominal, technically, some of them have glued on pads, which can be removed still, but I would say when people say non-removable pads, that's kind of the extent of what they're talking about.
My ear doesn't fully. Okay, there we go. I have to like push my ear into the. It doesn't fully go around my ear without scrunching it a little bit, but it is comfortable. But I don't like that it crumples the pinna. All right, let me listen to some tunes.
Are you muting me?
No.
Okay.
Go through my my test tracks here.
Wow. Resolve about to give an impression without taking off his glasses. Terrible.
Actually, yeah, for closebacks, I should do that. So right away, it doesn't pass the change the world test. Change the world is always it's the first track that I go to, and it's a pretty good disqualifier.
It would be immediate.
Yeah, and it does not pass that test. Don't need to listen to the whole track. I'm gonna put something else on here. It's super compressed sounding, meaning it's gonna have some wacky lower and mid treble going on, I imagine. This is just bad. This is just straight up bad.
What do you mean?
I mean, it's bad. Okay, hold on. This sounds a bit glary, a bit honky, also lean and a bit lean, but then there is still some bass, but not. It's not digging super deep for me. And then it sounds very compressed. So there's definitely something weird going on with the ear gain with lower treble, lower. I'm not sure specifically like treble, but like lower harmonics being emphasized meaningfully over upper ones, and then
Mhm.
some tizziness up there as well. Like I don't know, like some sort of like unpleasantness. Let me keep listening here for a second.
Mhm.
It sounds like every instrument is. It sounds like every instrument has a cold. Like if you get like a frog in your throat, imagine that, but for like a piano has the frog in its throat. There's something in the ear gain that has to be a narrow Q thing. Because it's like it'll sound fine for like certain parts of piano tones, and then every once in a while there's just this really strong glare that comes through. What about the resolution?
They're shit posting, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, I need to listen to something else with vocals because that's a good timbre indication. It has mid bass at least, some mid bass. No, no, it's not so much like the core part of of sort of the vocal range that I'm struggling with here. It's more like the general sense of compression that this has for percussive hits. For whatever's going on in the mid range, it just sounds like it's a honk and glare fiesta throughout the mids that I'm not vibing with. Yeah. So no, I'm gonna say I don't recommend this one. Should I measure it?
I mean, you can. We already have a measurement.
Oh, can you wait? Oh, you already have a 5 and 2 measurement.
Yes, I do.
Can you post it in somewhere?
1 second. I'm just gonna show it on the screen.
Okay.
That
I can't
work?
see it. I can't see the screen, so
Oh,
just post it to me in Discord as well.
it is in general.
Okay. Hey, look at that. Mid bass, yes. Honk and glare fiesta, yes. Lean, yes. Lower treble scrungles, yes. Oh, this measures exactly how it sounds.
Shocking. I'm truly shocked by this information.
Okay. Okay. This is before listening to music, when you were speaking and I had this on, I was like, okay, what? This is not. Suddenly, listener doesn't sound quite right. Finally, a raw graph in the
Do you want
headphone
to know
show.
that? Do you want to know that? It wasn't a raw graph. It just looks like one because the distance in the low mids to upper mids is so big. Do you want to know the price?
Yes, please.
$350.
Okay, I actually thought worse. I thought it was gonna be worse because, like, obviously, I would
That's
never buy
pretty
this.
bad,
Oh,
Andrew.
it's awful. But like, you know how like you get this kind of weirdness in the high end. Like if it wouldn't surprise me if like I'm thinking of like, there's the uh what's the Sendy Peacock and stuff like that, right? Where they make it out of wood and they do some fancy driver thing or whatever that they want to talk about, right? But like the whatever the result is just horrible. That's what I was kind of thinking would be going on with this one, like
Got it.
$1,100, um, but also dual driver. Like I don't know.
Fuck yeah.
My sense of it is like I don't know why there's a reason to do dual driver other than marketing in things in
There isn't.
headphones.
There
Yeah,
isn't. Well, I mean, there is theoretically. It's just they're never actually doing it to
yeah,
provide a better frequency response to their customers. It's just marketing.
yeah. No, it's no bueno. You get a Porta Pro for that money. Would I choose a Porta Pro over this? Yes. I hate the Porta Pro. I would choose it over this.
That is just a reasonable take. That's just normal. That's just should be everyone's preference.
Let's see. Yakucho says just admit it. The DT770 low mid scoop is just better than this one.
It's all about
Yep.
the quality of the mid scoop for
Yeah,
Resolve.
yeah,
That's what it's all about.
I don't know where this meme came from or why it is propagated.
Came from the truth, I think, like most memes.
It hasn't. It hasn't. In fact, I would say for me, it's the opposite. I like a little bit more thickness.
At least lately, you have been trending towards thickness. This is true.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a comment on my weight.
No, towards your sonic preference for the blam.
Well, yeah, but so here's the thing, though. My if I ever were to have a preference for a contoured lower mid section, that would be in the presence of a meaningful bass shelf. That a forward lower mid range section would just mean that the bass shelf starts higher in frequency, which is bad. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want to? Do you have anything else you want to give impressions of, or?
I have these other headphones. I don't know if I want to.
Chat, do you care about the other Kiwi Ears stuff?
Maybe we can reserve it for another live stream.
Yeah.
We
have other topics to talk about as well.
Yeah. We need the DJ headphone. Yeah. They do care. I mean, Kiwi Ears, like they have made some good stuff in the past. this not this, but
Mark says he just wants to see Andrew wear the blinking LED one. I will say that is the only one I care about for that reason.
Okay.
But I don't think anyone else cares about that one. Like it seems
it's this one, right? The DJ one, yeah.
I think people are probably most interested in the IEM, but like
you want me to review the Isvarna? That's another dual driver one, right? Planar and dynamic, I think.
Yep.
It could be interesting.
I don't know. I feel like they're just using the wrong driver for the wrong part of the FR. Like,
wait, what? Are they using the dynamic driver for the treble or the bass?
No, that's what I was saying. Like, I would be more interested if someone was using a planar for the bass and dynamic driver for the
well, especially
treble.
especially their planars, right? Like if they're implementing their planars. Okay. Actually, case not too bad, not too shabby, right? It's a smaller footprint than other cases. By the way, this is the what the fuck is the name of this? This is the Aventus. Okay.
Oh boy.
Right. And you said, "Oh boy."
So I either think this is the one you're going to like the most or the one you're going to like the least.
What the fuck? It's not. It doesn't unfold. Oh, there we go. What has happened? Okay. So, what?
Did you just break that thing, dude?
It doesn't unfold. What?
Do you need to turn it the other way?
What? Okay, I'm trying, but it doesn't go. Hold on. There we go. I got it. I got it on one side. Like that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, there we go.
Hell yeah.
All right. I don't know if it's
It's ANC, isn't it?
it is, but I don't know how if it's charged.
Oh.
Might not be charged.
Mark says his came charged.
Is there like an on button that I'm missing?
Mark, we might need your help here.
Like, there's only so many buttons, and I'm pushing all of them. Oh, there we go. It's pairing. I'm gonna hook it up to my phone. Wait, Mark has one too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he has measured it.
Okay, so you are already aware.
I am.
Why can't it find it? There he is. Okay, there it is. Kiwi Ears Aventus. Is there an app?
I doubt it. Mark can fill us in.
Okay, it's plugged in and it is charged. Yeah. Okay. Let us see how Kiwi Ears has managed to do a DJ headphone. Take my glasses off.
Of course.
It's also a little bit. It for me, it feels almost more on ear, right? Like it's definitely like big time Pinna Crush. Not a fan of that. Let us listen to music.
Oh, you're not going to turn the lights on?
Same tracks. Change the world.
Is this the one where? Is this the one that has?
It's really bright. Really bright.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Why does Andrew look like he wants to cry?
You do not need any more listening time with that product to know that it's terrible. That is a straight to the landfill product. Do you have a graph for this, Griffin?
I have Mark's. Were you listening to it with the ANC on or off?
Both. First off, then on.
Okay. Let me pull it up.
It's
Sorry, people probably can't see you because the graph is on the screen.
Oh, okay. I can't see the graph. Can you send it to? Can you post it in? I could do like 5-2-8 measurements, but like this is a. I don't know that
the people just need to know it's bad.
It's
in
really
general.
Bad. It's bright, strident, harsh, cold, lacks any sense of coherence. Graph's better on Marks than I thought it would.
Doesn't graph that well.
Wait, what's the? Yeah. You know what it is? It's like, so to me, when I listened to this, I don't even know that it sounded like that. Like, it sounded like it had no mids. Like, it had just treble and like a little bit of like 100 hertz. So I don't know.
So
Like, it
maybe
sounded like
also
it had,
seal.
could be seal, yeah. And it crushes the pinna. So
Mark says below 500 hertz varies pretty wildly on different seatings.
yeah, but it doesn't surprise me. Like, I was getting a little bit of extension, but like
Hmm.
it sounded like it had no mids, like no mids and specifically no low mids.
So it's a
So
perfect headphone for you.
yeah, clearly, especially because it lights up.
Of course, yeah. It just fits with your overall aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, do
Okay,
you wanna move on from
let's
these? Go back
let's
to
move on
topics.
that terrible disappointment. Let's move on.
Okay. So, one of my favorite topics that you came up with was actually the third one,
Okay,
which
let's do
is
that one, and then we'll do spicy half hour.
sounds good. The things we don't know about headphones that we'd like to. Now, this might be a little bit of a shorter section, actually, but
Yeah.
I feel like there are plenty of things, actually.
The big one for me right now, like if I'm going to get real specific about this, it really is to try and isolate or figure out the cause of that variation between 1 and 3 kilohertz between the measurement systems, right?
Mhm.
If this is an acoustic impedance thing, that's quite massive. Like if it's an acoustic impedance thing, sorry, if it's an acoustic impedance thing that more closely resembles the acoustic impedance for real humans, that's huge. That kind of completely changes the measurement paradigm.
'Cause that's quite low in frequency.
Well, it's not like we've been operating under the assumption that this is something that we care about specifically for information below like 2, 3, 400 hertz with IE with like sealed, high acoustic impedance products like IEMs, maybe closed back headphones, maybe ANC headphones, um, but not between 1 and 3 kilohertz.
So, this kinda gets to what I wanted to know that I don't know, which is I would love to quantify the kind of range of difference between listeners caused by the input impedance of their eardrum for IEMs and how that relates to the output impedance of certain IEM drivers. So the explain like I'm five version of that um, is there a disconnect between how dynamic driver and balanced armature drivers measure in the canals we use versus how they respond in our actual ears? My conjecture is that the balanced armatures actually do vary more than we see in the
Hmm.
band you're talking about, like the 1 to 3 kilohertz range that the actual resonance of the ear canal, like the native resonance of the ear canal, occupies. Um,
So having something that's actually going to having a measurement fixture that's going to propagate that difference more accurately, in a more human-like manner would be useful.
well, yeah, and this is another place where the 5128 would be better. But it would also add a layer of uncertainty to the analysis of like, okay, so with a full sealed balance armature set, we know that it's going to show as less bass on 5128 than 711, and the 5128 is more accurate in that band, right?
Mhm.
Like for the bass, the 5128 is just more accurate. If that's also true about the upper mid range with BAIEMs as measured on the 711 versus the 5128, that um that is a problem that I feel like would cause even more issues than we already have with 711 measurements of IEMs.
I mean, it's interesting to me that you're talking about this with respect to IEMs because for me, it's like that band. I see this with open back headphones too, and I'm like, what to do about this? Like,
That's kind of why I'm thinking it might not be an acoustic impedance
Mm,
only thing with over-ear
yeah,
headphones.
yeah, 'Cause you'd
Um,
think that that would be well, okay, except you do have some results that are way more consistent there
Close. Yeah, yeah, that are way more close between the
than
heads, but
others for open back headphones, and it's like,
but acoustic impedance isn't the only difference they have.
I know, and that's why you have confounding variables, and so you can't be confident that that's the only thing that's causing it, but also there is a difference in acoustic impedance for those headphones. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. It's wide enough that it causes me a lot of worry, about like the general community consensus on how to read the data. I mean, there's worries for that regardless, but like when I see that kind of variation, I'm like, I don't know what the truth is in this band. Like for a wide population. Like obviously I can listen to it, but like I'm saying, like when I'm presenting data, I don't know what's more appropriate here, and this is super wide.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I mean, look, I definitely share wanting to know about that. Um,
yeah.
is there another one that you're thinking of
Yep.
recently?
There's another one, and it's the more obvious one, which is what does preference look like when FR in situ at the eardrum is controlled for? Is it narrower? And I expect it is.
Maybe.
We don't know, but I expect it is. Basically, to frame that question or that answer another way is to say that how much of the variation in preference is down to the experience of the products being much more different across people than we realize.
I share in the conjecture. Um, one that I'm specifically curious about because of the stuff I've been looking into with the bounds, which you've seen some of. What the fuck does the Harman target actually look like on any rig we actually use?
I
No,
know.
I'm serious. I'm serious. Like the one that everyone likes is not the actual sound of the Harman target, like almost as a certainty. And like I get that it might sound alarmist or like over dramatic to like point
You're
to
talking
that as
about
like a point of consternation with Harman's work because obviously the important part is not the target, it's the conclusions that kind of come about from the years long spanning research.
well,
But all these
you're
people
also
using Harman are doing so, but it's not actually
it's not
what the
Harmon.
result of the
No,
test
it's not
was.
that. No, because you have the delta between the KB5 and the Welty pinna.
No one has that ear. So like
Yeah,
people like Mark, for example, like and like me and anyone else using the older Grosspinna
six.
should be
Yeah.
using like the 2013 and 2015 target. Like those
Oh,
are made
because
on
that
that
year's
ear, and those
yeah,
are well done tests. 2015 probably the like easily the best done, but everyone else should not be.
yeah. People using 45 CAs.
With the anthropometric
Mars.
ear,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
they
it's a
should
different
be.
ear. Sean shouldn't be. It's and it's funny because like we were under the assumption for the longest time that you shouldn't be using Harmon with that KB6 ear because it's not what like
Well,
Sean
it's
was
not what he
using
used for the last one, for the
yeah, for
segmentation paper.
2018 and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um and it's also not like it's not compatible with what the sort of existing paradigm was um for measurements with Gross systems. So, but to me, it's also like it's unclear to me what, hmm, it's unclear to me what is going on with the Welty pinna specifically. Um,
What part is unclear? Like the actual anatomical difference?
so, well, the reason why I raised this, and it's kind of part of what I've tried to communicate in the past, uh, with respect to like the sort of like thing that is obscuring the clarity for this research for me at least is the in situ how the in situ response on real people varies from what we get from the Welty pinna's HBTF effect or like pinna effects or whatever we want to say, right, for the Welty pinna. right? Whatever's causing it to propagate the way that it does. So like, so to me, like our complaint here is like the delta between the common gross fixtures that we use, like with the KB5 ear and the Welty pinna, right? Like that's like, okay, that's an issue. But to me, it's like, but there's also an issue of like our actually like the in situ response and how that's going to vary um relative to the Welty pinna. The Harman target is kind of I don't want to say it's useless there, but it's certainly not as helpful as it's been purported to be. Like how it's like
Yeah, and it's just interesting to me because, like, because we don't know this thing that we would absolutely like to know, like, people have an idea of what Harmon sounds like that is just not correct. So, like, all of the people who hear, Harmon as excessively muddy or low res or whatever might feel differently if they actually heard the Harmon target
well, but that's
as it
kind of what
exists.
right, and so that's kind of my point, though, with respect to anybody indexing for sort of the Harman checklist reviews and are EQing and everything, none of them are hearing the Harman target.
Yeah, and but
And
that extends to us, like, the people who are, like, using, like, a filter set
yeah,
based on that work.
it's
Nope.
exactly, and
Nope.
that's why I'm like,
Actually, no.
yeah. No, I hear you, and that's
It's a problem,
yeah,
but it's one we don't
um,
have an actual answer to yet. It's
yeah.
one we might have one for soon. I
I think
think it's
the
gonna upset people.
I think the it will upset people.
Yeah, it's gonna be oh god.
Well, we'll see how consistent it actually ends up being once I get the K712 Pro here and
Okay, so
start
Mark
doing that.
says back to square one. I wanna vehemently oppose that sentiment because there are still parts of Harmon that are good. It's just this is just another indicator of what I think we've all known, at least followers of this channel will have known for a while, which is that the single target lines are just not actually all that characteristic of the variation in listener preference we know to exist. And moving away from the single target paradigm to something that better characterizes that variation is, I think, a better representation of the research and probably a better direction for analysis of headphone frequency response to go.
Yeah. The I think the saving grace as well for the way that the Harman target could be used, and probably the way Sean thinks of it, is as a really wideband instrument in the sense of like sufficiently wideband where their assumptions about HPTF consistency, that like let's say the erroneous assumptions, don't matter. And in that respect, it's like I I get it. Like if you're using that to say, hey, we should tune headphones like this, whatever variation that may exist for how sound is going to propagate across between like the when the research was done and how we're measuring headphones now is going to vary even more in practice regardless for individuals, like anyway, so it doesn't there's no reason to give a shit about that, right? So we just go super wide on Harmon target, we implement it this way, and let individuals just deal with the fact that this kind of average is not the perfect result for any individual because it never will be.
Yeah, I mean, there's an extent to which that has to have been true when they
Yeah.
published the research, right? Like they
My
weren't
criticism
smoothing
there,
that target for no reason.
yeah, and my criticism there is that like that is not clear from the research. Like
It's not. It's not.
it's
They don't talk about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's certainly not the way that the community has run with it.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely not.
so
Yeah, no. As Jude says, uh, logarithmic plot, squiggly line, bona fide. Like, just the overall amount of
mhm,
questioning done into these measurements as they're displayed is very lacking.
100%.
It
Which is
betrays how
why,
subjective measurements actually are.
yeah, I which is why it's interesting when companies that are, let's say, able to produce products that are highly competent, like for example when you get results like the HD 550, for example, um, you end up kind of getting a bit of a lens or insight into the thought process that others have with respect to this kind of stuff, because it's like, okay, this is their instantiation of what they think is good. Like, so you can't always know that because it oftentimes, well, it's amazing how often shit goes awry in production, right? Like you can have a great concept and then the outcome is bad, but you still have to run with it because there's an expectation of release. And I
Yeah.
think that's happened countless times for a lot of these products that exist. But when something like the 550 shows up and it's like, this is legitimately solid, um, you do get an insight, I think, into the thought process, into the theory that the manufacturer has. And it's amazing to me how much of it is based on conventional wisdom surrounding headphone design that we know about from the works of Teal and H&M. And it's like this is still foundational, like this is still true today as it always has been, you know? And as far as these evaluative tools, it's like it makes it so that like evaluations relative to Harmon just stop making sense to me.
So this is kind of why I'm excited about the new bounds,
Yeah.
because I actually think evaluation against Harmon's work and model is actually going to get a lot more sense making to people. Um,
Hopefully, I mean, I doubt it because they'll see the new bounds and go, "What the fuck is this?" Like it completely messes with the original benefit. One of the key benefits of the original compensation model, or like the calibration model,
oh,
um,
the lack of
which is
specificity to IEMs or headphones.
the
Oh,
avoiding the sign illusion, because now you have the
oh,
sign
I mean
illusion
the
again.
existing bounds already kind of
Like,
compromise
they
on that.
already kind of compromise it, but
Yeah.
not nearly as much as the new ones will. It's like, now we have another thing that looks kind of like a raw plot. Like,
I wouldn't say it looks like a raw plot. I
it doesn't
think
look like a raw plot because it doesn't have an HRTF, but, like, for
it does
anybody who is
show an HRTF feature that wasn't
it
there
shows a feature, and
previously, which
people,
is
when
good,
they're
I
looking at
think.
compensated data, are used to a flat line of some kind, and
Yeah,
that's the problem, because it's not gonna be a flat line, because listener preference isn't a flat line, or at least for how the distribution ends up working.
yeah.
So
What I meant by this is that I think, um, even for my own judgment, I think I'm coming around to the idea of kind of what Sean showed in his last published IEM study, which is that the same listener can prefer different, very different signatures equally. Like I think if I had my druthers, as you would say,
I would say that.
I would have a very bass light and treble light signature, and most of the focus would be on the mids where I find most of the texture. But as we've seen from the video I just published, a very V-shaped headphone can be a great time depending on the music you're listening to.
And the
Which
in-situ
and to be
response.
yes, but to be clear, they listened to 3 songs in Harmon's work.
Yes. Yes.
So, uh, obviously that's
And they're
not
not even good songs, like, I'm sorry, Tracy
not
Chapman's
even are
Fast
they
Car
not only
sucks.
not even it does. So the original version of that thumbnail, hold on, let me see if I could share the original version of that thumbnail
Okay,
for
okay.
people because it's really good. I want to give a shout out to
It's
Jake,
on
who's one of our editors.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's,
This picture is so stupid.
but can you send it in general in our
Yeah,
general
yeah, yeah.
folder?
Hold on, I need to save it in the right spot first. 1 second. Oh my god, it's so stupid. I love it. It didn't exactly fit with the idea of the video as well as what we ended up going with, but uh, it's in general.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. Hold on. All right. Ready, chat? There you go.
This should go on. This needs to be a Reddit meme for Meme Monday. I
So I just want to say no shade to Tracy Chapman. And
No,
obviously no shade to this HD 600, but um
some shade, man. It's I remember I was at I was a bit of an asshole at Munich High End when I was going to the speaker booths that were set up, and I had them because they always had their music, right? And I asked them if they could play Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, and like so many of them failed, right? Well, there's one in particular that was like particularly bad, but also like when I did that, I realized just how shit of a song it is. I was like, I don't want to listen to this song
dude, it's not a
anymore.
very good song or arrangement. Like I
No, it's
get
just
why
boring.
they use it, but I actually think they're kind of missing the whole crest factor thing. Like it's
Oh
a
yeah.
very
S-
sparse
uh,
song. Like I get that like if you take a snapshot, it kind of looks like pink noise, but like
yeah.
that's not
No.
because the song sounds great or
No.
anything.
No.
Um but where I was going with this is like not even are they not good songs, which I like the one Steely Dan song
The
that they
Steely Dan
used.
one is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bird on a Wire isn't terrible either.
Yeah.
But they're very kind of homogenous in terms of like the composition of instruments that they have. And I don't think most people listening to headphones are listening to those three songs or really music mixed like those three songs. Like the Steely Dan mix in particular is very unique in that it's like very slick, modern,
Yeah.
clean rock instrumentation with a ton of sub bass. Like it's a very not normal rock mix.
Hmm.
Um, and the other two are kind of unconventional too. Um, yeah.
Okay. Do you think this is? I want to be clear that I don't necessarily think that this should be done, but I'm just curious what you think about this. Uh, about the idea of loosening the controls for the for the program material, in the sense that let you like if you let users select their own music, what would sort of shake out of the? Would there be a
I,
merit in
I
that? Do you
would
think?
say I would say not loosening the controls, because then you get into the issue of like circle of confusion, right? Because some
100%.
people obviously are mixing on flat
But
monitors because they
I
don't
kind of
know any
don't
better.
care about Circle of Confusion, to be
Well, no,
honest.
I care about how it affects this because I think I would want a wider selection of music, like certainly,
Oh,
like
so you could
with
basically
no question,
say
but I would
not
make sure it is all kind of within a bounds
within,
of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
average
yeah. And
spectra
it
and
wouldn't be
crest
hard
factor.
to find that. I think you could find
No, I
that
don't think so at
quite
all.
easily.
No,
Yeah.
in fact, other firms have already like aggregated a bunch of very popular songs that are all mixed similarly within a certain bounds.
Yeah.
Isotope, who makes the
Oh
RX
yeah. Yeah.
software that we both use. I don't know if it's part of RX or if it's part of one of
Elements or
their other
whatever the
suites
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
Ozone,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
they have one called Tonal Balance Control,
Hmm.
which basically has a bunch of genres of songs that have like they've compiled a bunch of music for and kind of created a set of bounds of variation
Hmm.
based on both crest factor and like momentary FR.
Hmm.
Um, if you were using like music that fit within the same, I guess, bounds for lack of a better term, in terms of RMS level and
Yeah.
frequency response, I'd be totally fine with that. If anything, I think what the other stuff that was used in the Harmon work actually kind of lacks is sub bass. Like Cousin Dupree is really the only one that like you can kind of see it. It has like an extra half octave relative to the other ones in that in the papers. And it's there, but it's also like a very lean mix otherwise. So yeah, I would be interested to see how like a Harmon research with only like pop music, like Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande and Dua Lipa like actually went, because that would be more reflective of what people are actually listening to, right?
See, I agree with nominal. I want the Meshuggah target curve, where people only get to listen to Meshuggah. See what shakes out there.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, should we do spicy half hour?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sounds bueno. Guys, peppers. Peppers,
Pepper
let's
time,
go.
babies.
Um do you have any spicy takes for us today?
I do. I'm not happy about it, but I
Ooh,
do.
okay. What is it?
It just ties back to what I was saying. People I don't want to say that. Give me
Say
a
it.
second.
Say it.
I was going to say people should stop using the Harman 2018 target.
Ooh. Now,
Yeah.
do you extend that to filters?
Yes, I especially extend it to filters.
Yeah. What would
Yeah.
you want 2015?
I would say 2015 might make more sense because we actually have some of us using the ear that uses.
Well, there's
But
that.
Cram, I don't think it's a cold take. I think most people want to use the 2018 target over all of the other
So
ones.
I want to use the 2018 target because I want to be able to
Reduce the
make
ear gain.
well So funny you should mention that. I mean, there. This is pure conjecture, and I have nothing to really back this up. But
I know what
something
you're gonna say.
about that, you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Something
yeah, I know
about
what you're
that
gonna say. Of course, I
variation
know
in
what you're
the
gonna
one to
say.
3 kilohertz band for the between the two rigs may be actually responsible for this.
Maybe it might actually be responsible for the opposite because in the segmentation paper. Now, obviously, this isn't the ear we have data on, so like this isn't the ear any of us are measuring on, but for the segmentation paper, there were times when people actually preferred a shoutier 1 to 3 kilohertz region than DF. But every time they did, it was balanced by a lot of bass and low mid range.
Yep.
So
Oh, so you're saying that? Well, okay. I'm
this
just
is why I
saying.
want new bounds.
I'm just saying with respect to the way that this looks, right? So like if you had, say you're using a KB5, you're measuring the headphones on the KB5, and it measure so to back up here, typically headphones will measure with less ear gain relative to the KB5 than they do with the on the
5128.
5128, right? That's not to say that the KB5 has less ear gain, that's just more slightly. But as far as the headphones behavior on those fixtures, it propagates with less energy in that band. Um, so what I'm saying is that the reduction, right, the post hoc reduction, let's say, may have been a function of whatever result they had ended up there not being a good fit with the human response.
Okay, so this is where I kind of get into where people shouldn't use the 2018 target. Why are we using a target where we don't know the methodology between
I know, I
like
know.
why it was made?
Yeah.
Like I actually think it's not
So
unlikely that because Sean doesn't actually remember how it was made, that it was made a completely different way. Like,
yeah.
we don't know. Oh, there are a lot of peppers in chat.
And there's some good ones. I just want to button up that the
Please.
2018 thing. The reason why I want to use 2018 though isn't because of the 3 kilohertz adjustment. It's more to do with the 2018 was the largest body, like was and it had 2018 is the impetus for the segmentation as well, isn't it?
Yes. So it's the first time that Sean did his own grouping
Yeah, yeah,
based on
the
the results.
dendrogram and the thing. Yeah,
Yes.
so there's something
But
there
it
that is
has this it doesn't have as many respondents as the 2015 paper.
2015 is the
And we don't
200
have
and
access to the actual
yeah,
demographics of the listeners like we do for the 2015 paper.
yeah, yeah.
Like in all respects, I think the 2015 paper is kind of the better paper in terms of like the actual controls being public to the people reading the paper. Um, and
Should we just use the 2015 results? Like you use 2015 filters for everything? Like I'm fine to move to that.
maybe, but it would have to be based on the HPTF of the HD518 measured on that ear, which I don't think we have.
No, but I have the 518. We can measure it on these, and we have the DFHRTFs for these. I don't
Right,
know how
but
much
I need to know how it measures on the 006 ear because the delta between
I
that
actually
and
have
what
the
it
006 here as well.
do you really?
Yeah, somewhere.
Wait, really? That's huge. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have the 006 ear, you need to pull that out and measure a 518 on it
I
because
don't
it's about the delta between that
I
and the
don't know if I have a
2015
clone
target,
coupler
and then we
though.
apply that to the other HRTFs. But anyway,
Yeah, I
um,
I don't know if I have a clone coupler, but I believe I do have a 06.
no, do it on the real coupler.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the real coupler is an RIO 402, which has the damping, not
I'm not sure
the.
it matters for over
It
here.
might not matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, peppers. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Technicality should still be considered when buying headphone if such FR at eardrum can't be achieved greater in the less than 10 band PEQ. I don't understand this question. Buying
Buying
HD
HD
800.
800 for soundstage is
Yeah.
justified instead of arguing if soundstage is real or not. I don't think anyone's arguing that that's not justified. Like, I think technicality is going to be a thing people care about regardless of if we tell them to or not. Because people have experiences and you can't really like tell someone they didn't have that experience. Some people try, but because FR isn't quantifiable for each individual at their eardrum, like we can't say your experience is wrong.
Well,
So like how a headphone presents that stuff on average is still likely to be a factor worth considering for people.
I think that the problem though is still always the disconnect between the interpretation of what somebody is saying, like the semantics basically, like the and what the what the person actually means. So like and I'm not saying this necessarily in terms of like the whole Wittgenstein problem because like that's obviously the bigger supervening problem. But when I talk about something like, hey, this has the spaciousness effect, the default assumption is to treat this as separate from FR. Right, because like if you think about any subjective report, what that is effectively a report of the effect that the FR in situ for that person elicits, right, and then whatever meaning they attach to those things. And if you consider, okay, well, it's basically the psychoacoustic interpretation of what the graph would be at the eardrum of that individual person, and you never get that layer when you're dealing with the measurement fixture, right? You never get the psychoacoustic interpretation of what the rig heard. You just get the picture. So if we're thinking, at least in my view, if we're thinking about this properly, the conjunction of measurements, the graph, and the subjective report, right? Like even if you go as far as to look at like Krin's tonal technical dichotomy thing, right? That is a more complete, well-rounded depiction of what the performance of this product is. It's just that the interpretation is never thought of in those terms.
Yeah. People have become accustomed to it being separate.
Yes.
Yeah. That's kind of
Uh,
what I'm trying to achieve with like that video I just put out.
yeah.
Like keeping the language as audiophile as I can,
Yeah.
but making sure I'm tying as many things as
Yeah.
I can remember to
Yeah.
back to FR.
Yeah, and I think we just have to do that. There's always going to be pushback against that, but
Yeah.
I think we like nobody else is going to tell them this. So,
Not everyone can. I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world to tie
yeah.
a frequency response coloration to a subjective report. Like,
It's
if it
it's it's
was,
not.
we wouldn't have this issue.
I was trying to do this in my Batiste MG review, but even then I real like I had to shoot it twice because I realized this is difficult to communicate. Like
Yeah.
the fact that I hear the mid-range in this unique way as a function of two particular colorations that work well together for certain types of music. Um, that's so difficult. It's so difficult to get that to land in a video, right? Um,
Yeah, I hear you.
'Cause people are just gonna gloss over that. It's
Yeah,
like,
no,
"Yeah,
yes,
tell
yes.
me about what the driver imparts with its, special whatever, I don't care about your frequency response mumbo jumbo tonality bullshit.
Yeah.
You care so much about timbre, you ignore all the other shit."
Yeah, you can't even get ladies to frequently respond, bro. Why should I listen to you?
I mean, I can. It's pretty easy
Yeah,
for me
no, me
actually.
too. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Uh, all right. Uh,
Planar
Andrew's
drivers
car.
should be used for bass in IEMs.
Hold on. What Hartu says Andrew's car has just found a new owner and he missed it due to the closebacks. What?
Was there a car alarm going off or something?
I think it was in yours.
Oh, it probably was, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, I, Evil Milton, planar drivers should be used for bass in IEMs. The problem there, and I have looked at kind of the difference in leak tolerance between BAs, dynamic drivers, planar drivers for IEMs. The problem is that to have a planar driver with equivalent leak tolerance to like a decent dynamic driver, it needs to be a quite large driver. So like the 14 millimeter planar driver that you see on the most of the planar IEMs, those have like equivalent leak tolerance to a dynamic driver as far as the difference shown between the 711 and 5128. But a dynamic driver is pretty much always going to be simpler to implement.
Hmm.
Um, so while I agree that like in theory, a planar driver's benefits would be great for IEMs, like having even more leak tolerance, in practice, it doesn't really work out that way because of the size limitation.
Mhm.
Now there could be, maybe you make a smaller driver that's heavier and thus it has a lower free air resonance, but it's still a very small driver. Um, so I'm not really sure how far that can be taken towards the territory of like more leak tolerance and better bass extension with imperfect seal or differences in ear canal volume. Um, yeah, and like even with I got to measure some of the I got to measure the eye sign lineup on the 5128 when I had it for CanJam. Um, those are weird. Those are very, 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 very weird IEMs, and it's not like a situation where because it's open back, you actually get the consistency between ear canals. You would assume it's those IEMs are very weird because they are wider in the nozzle and just like novel in how they're constructed and how the acoustics of them work. The treble region is like entirely length based.
I just realized something. This is
What's up?
totally unrelated to anything. Do the 550 pads fit on the 518?
Probably. Yeah, why? It's a 5 series headphone.
Yeah. Because one of the concerns that we had before was with pad. So those pads are really worn. The ones that Oratory sent
Oh,
me.
on the 5 8, you didn't swap the pads?
No. I couldn't. I didn't have any 5 series thing to
Oh.
use. But also, we didn't know how worn the pads would have been when it was being used for as the replicator headphone, which probably would have had an effect. So
Yep,
that's still a struggle. But at the very least,
definitely.
we
But we
should
can
be
get
able to
arranged.
get.
We
Yeah,
can
we
we
should be
can
able to get
see.
a range. Yeah.
Definitely do that.
Sorry, this is a separate thing. I just
Yeah.
triggered me.
Le Cram. So like for the dynamic driver versus planar, it was 10 millimeter for the dynamic, 14 millimeter for the planar.
Okay, Lacram, is your name Marcel? You just go Marcel
Almost
backwards?
almost certainly.
All right. Let's see. Andrew's pinna gets crushed by on ears only because it is weak.
True.
It is a Shure 0035 hardness pinna, which is on the more.
Only at the softest point, I assume.
I was gonna say it's definitely on the more flaccid side in comparison to like the 5 and 2/8.
I feel the
Certainly in the
5128 is stiffer than the Grossier.
a little bit, yeah. Well, I don't know how exactly the Grossier is short 035 all like it's not all the way through. I don't think. I could be
My
wrong about
impression was
this.
that it was, and that's kind of the problem.
Okay, but if you compared Cameron's Shure 35
I
hardness
haven't. Have
pinna,
you?
it's yeah. Well, I haven't measured it, but I held it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, of course.
way more flaccid than I at least I haven't done them side by
When
side,
you
but
say
there's
Cameron's, you mean the clone that he bought?
no
Okay,
the
well, should we talk about the other one?
which other one? I'm talking about the one he had the prosthetic ear that he
Yeah,
had
that's the one I'm
created.
talking about. Should we talk
Okay,
about that?
why not?
Okay. I don't know.
Is there any reason why not?
I don't know. We just
All right.
haven't talked about it publicly, I don't think.
Oh, well, it's because we haven't done anything with it. But like the that pin, at least my impression of it was that it was way more flaccid than a real human pinna is because it didn't have and I don't get quite that same impression when I like flick the Gross pinna. Um, when I flick the Gross pinna, it
This man
seems
just goes around flicking pinners like no one's
yeah,
business.
it's got a little bit more of a. There was a moment at CanJam where we were all just standing in a circle, kind of like flicking each other's the flange for each other's ears to try and assess the shore hardness of the backside of the pin. That was a really weird moment, but I remember we did that. Um, but yeah, no, it is definitely true that I have floppier ears than other people do. I know this is true, and that's probably why I hate on ears so much.
Interesting.
Resolves uncertainty with the 1 to 3 kilohertz area, validates hi-fi man tunings. No, it does not, because those are the exception. Those are the ones that don't have the ovoid ones
Yeah, those don't
specifically,
get any extra 1 to 3
they,
kilohertz dip, but they still have a dip.
but they still have it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
those are the ones where you can be a lot more confident in the FR that you see on the graph than the vast majority of other headphones. And it's weird because it's like other low acoustic impedance, generally headphones don't. Like they're not as good as the hi-fi mans for that specific thing. So it's a yeah. I don't know what the answer is there, but I want to look into it.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. Yeah, you go ahead.
Headphones without EQ is cope. Probably not a hot take for you guys, but the Headphone Show Discord, or the headphones.com Discord, I should say, disagreed with this take.
Oh, interesting.
Um, yeah, I mean, look, in any public space, you're gonna find some people who disagree with that take. I know you probably ran into like Nick and Austin and maybe Milton too. Um,
Uh I know DMS doesn't like EQ. He probably thinks that
well,
EQ is cope.
to my understanding, his problem has more so been to do with uh ease of use, and it's like logistical concerns more than like actually not liking the sound quality
No,
improvement.
no, yeah, but basically, I think his perspective is that the very simple perspective is if you have to EQ a headphone, it's a bad headphone. Whereas I think for us, the more nuanced and maybe even uh,
KZO.
KCO here, the nuance there is it is a better headphone the less EQ you have to do, right? So it's
It
like
is
we
it
we,
is
we apply.
arguably unrealistic to expect a headphone that does not improve with EQ, or
Yeah,
like
exactly.
like
So it's like we just care, like my sense of it is like we care enough about sound quality that we are going to do this for every headphone no matter what. And we just have that same kind of like scrutiny applied in a more gradient way, right? To
yeah,
say
well
that
the truth is in the middle, because like if a headphone does suck without EQ, then that headphone does just kind of suck, right? Like
yeah.
that's not
If
weird
it's
to
not
say.
listenable without EQ, like if it's bad without EQ, it's a bad headphone. It should be good without
Yes.
EQ, but it can also be better with EQ. And
Yes,
that's what
there's
we
never
want
been
to
a
see.
situation where a headphone that is good without EQ hasn't been able to be improved.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
and unfortunately,
Yeah.
not for KZO, but for his dialectic opponents, I guess. Um, avoiding EQ is the actual cope.
So actually, this is my problem with the anti EQ gang. Usually, is because they create this straw man of like people doing the EQ thing are like apart from like the whole ruining the technicalities meme, right? Like they create this straw man that like when people are EQing their headphones, they're doing so in a way that is completely different from what the headphone would end up sounding like, and that they actually think that the headphone is good like as a like the default sound signature of the headphone is like amazing when those people don't necessarily think that they're they're just wanting to improve the sound quality even for good headphones.
Yeah. Yeah, even good headphones are gonna have errors on your head. Like, it's just
Exactly.
bound to happen.
Yeah, at least that's my sense of it. Like there's definitely people who are doing that sort of older, well, and I say older, doing that way of EQ where they're taking a headphone that is like a hi-fi man Sundara closed and they're trying to fix it, and it's like, yeah, you should probably do that, but you shouldn't have bought that headphone in the first place
Yes, that
because
is
it's
a
a bad
bad
headphone.
headphone. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next, those thermal shaping materials should be standard for IEM tips. This would be a cheap way to get a CIEM. I'm not too familiar with this.
I'm not either. I assume it's some sort of, like, plastic, like,
Well, didn't
foam or something?
Campfire do something like that where they had like a CIEM like custom flange that could be applied to the tips? I may just be totally making this up.
I mean,
Maybe it's a
I
different company.
know the problem with this is you'll never get a CIEM fit like that, because you'll either A, be putting something on top of an existing UIEM, a universal IEM,
Mhm.
which won't result in the same thing that happens with CIEMs, where they're typically inserted deeper into your ear. So you're kind of pushing the lower treble cringe, for lack of a better term, higher in frequency, um, like you do with etymonics or something like that. And you get more of a DF shape to the like kind of 5 to 8 kilohertz region, with CIEMs, at least because of the deeper insert. I don't think you're doing that with an extra little thing put on top of it, because you're either getting the same or longer insert depth than you would with a traditional tip. Um, but also the material it's made of might be cringe. Like it might be made of foam, and foam is
I mean,
cringe.
it's an interesting idea of like for people like me who are length mody boys with most IEMs.
I mean, look, if you have issues with length modes, foam should just be what you use,
Yeah,
period. Because like really the main thing that's going to help there isn't
insertion
even
depth.
insert. Well, no,
Well, it's not.
isn't even insert depth if issue is that your canal is just creating more resonance. Like is the issue that it's
Yeah, but
creating more
wouldn't
resonance
insert.
or that where the peak typically shows up is relative to a dip in RTF or something like that? Like we
Right,
don't
so you just want to
know.
shift that around a little bit to try and
For
find put it in a better
you, that might
spot.
be enough,
Yeah,
right? But if your canal
but
is
wouldn't.
especially resonant for some reason, shifting that is just gonna move a very big resonance to other places in the treble. The actual solution would be adding damping to widen the Q of the
Oh, I
resonance.
see what you're saying. Well, yeah, but I think if you can solve it by shifting it to a place where you would want a dip to be, that would be ideal, right? Like if you're basically able to cancel it out, that would be the ideal solution. And what I'm
That
thinking
would
is
be
maybe
nice.
something like this would allow you to do that, but then who knows what the response would be for the rest of it. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
uh okay. If a recording sounds narrow in a neutral sound signature, it's the recording's fault, not the headphone. Neutral. Do you mean anatomically neutral? Like that might be where this is a spicy take.
If a recording sounds narrow.
Let's say lean, maybe,
So the thing is,
or
there is a
narrow.
way to objectively characterize how narrow or wide the mix is set out, right? And if a person is complaining about it and you show them like a plot of like how things are actually panned in the song and it turns out they're narrow, will that actually change their mind about their judgment of the headphone? I don't think it will. Like I think a lot of people want even like kind of I don't know if it's like narrow is the right word, but kind of just like spatially normal sounding music to sound extra something.
See,
And I
so
okay.
I don't know what the term narrow refers to here, whether we're talking
I assume it
spaciousness
literally
or
means to like
I tell yeah.
the centralness of panning. Um, I could be wrong.
Like maybe like narrow in frequency, like narrow. This
No,
means
like literally like the elements are not panned to full 90 degrees.
no. I
They're
get what
more of
you're
like a
saying. I'm just
yeah.
saying I don't know if that's what this person means. So I need further
Mm,
clarification
got it.
because like because the way I would like the other interpretation would be something along the lines of like if you if a recording sounds thin on a anatomically neutral sound signature, it's a bad recording. And that would mean that it would be like say you had like a DF uh sound signature, right? And if the recordings sound thin on that, then it would be a bad recording. And I don't know that I disagree.
Seems fine.
Yeah. But maybe that's just the wrong interpretation of this
Yeah, to be
question.
clear, I wasn't disagreeing with what he said. I
Yeah.
was just saying, even though he's right, I don't think that will stop audiophiles complaining.
Oh yeah. All right. IEMs need DSP with harmonic distortion in the bass to sound more like speakers and more natural. Weird take. I don't know how I feel about this.
I mean, I disagree. Yeah, no, I mean, we need to take the wins where we can get them with IEMs, and one of their
Like,
few wins is that they
yeah,
can
but
have pretty good THD.
isn't this like just like saying like m- it's common for speakers to be bad in certain bands, and we should make our headphones match bad sound
Well, that's the
so
thing,
that it
like,
sounds more like speakers? What the fuck is
well
that?
with a take like this, I don't know if I should take them at their word. Like, it sounds like the kind of implicit complaint there is that IEMs don't sound enough like speakers, right?
Right, but they
But I think
shouldn't.
there are probably bigger reasons for that that aren't
Yeah.
to do with THD.
Okay, actually, here's another one though. Okay, in a sense, this makes me think of the Harman target and and it's one of the okay, right? Like speakers. What? Why is the shelf like part of the impetus behind doing it that way was because of the crossover for subwoofers, right?
And to be
It's
clear,
like,
I think it's a sensible spot.
sure, but this is one area where, like, if you could do things better, why wouldn't you? That's my
This is why I'm excited about the bounds.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Because that's about to get a whole lot less prescriptive. Spoiler to the peoples.
yeah. All right, you can find. I'm not sure where we're at, so if you see the next one,
Um, every
audiophile.
headphone at least
Yeah.
has some peaks and dips to fix, and fixing them is always better. Not a spicy take here, but elsewhere, probably that is a good take.
Well, is it always better?
Yes. I'm being intentionally kind of
Yeah, but like if you're
final about it,
yeah, but
but
if you're looking at a graph, that's what people are going to think. That you need to fix it relative to the graph. I don't
yeah,
know that that's
graph
necessary.
sniffers are not
I don't know if that's necessarily true if you're talking about the graph, but like perceptually, sure.
yeah, the graph it's almost certainly incorrect, but
Yeah,
perceptually I would assume it's correct.
yeah. Dusk fits fantastic, and the analog sound is more enjoyable than the default DSP. Whoa!
Oh, Mark.
He knew that was going to be our reaction.
Yeah, well, like
Oh no!
okay, I think it's important to like analyze why that might be the case for some people though. Like I think the analog sound for the Dusk DSP has much more textured bass. I think for people who don't prefer as much bass, it's also going to be more preferable because the original, like the Dusk DSP default, is a pretty like warm, thick signature.
Mhm.
And I think Mark fits into both of those categories where they would want more upper mids than I think a DF target calls for, which is why he keeps on using his own target and calling it meta instead of the flippin' DFH or TF. Yeah, we're gonna do that another time. Um, but it's also like he tends to just prefer less bass, I think, than a lot of people, which is incredibly based, I will say. And
It's
it's one of the
based to
things I
prefer
feel
less
like
bass.
yeah, no. It's one of the things I consistently agree with him about.
Mhm.
Um, but now that we've kind of outlined the reasons why Dusk Analog might be more preferable, no.
So to me, this just goes back to that video that Precog Vision did, which is one of my favorite videos that we have on the channel, which is details coloration. And for some people, it absolutely will be
Yep.
100%. Technicalities is coloration, and but of course, it all depends on how you attach meaning, right? But like for many people, the effect, whatever the flair is, well, I think he called it tasteful coloration, but like that's kind of the
Mhm.
point. It's like
Yeah.
doing something specific, deliberate with the tuning that is not normal, intentionally not normal, to create an effect.
Yeah, and to be clear, colorations are literally so ubiquitous in the IM sphere that it has been a years long task to get
Yeah.
people to to understand that those colorations might not be neutral actually.
Mhm.
Like
Ooh, Super says, I do not think that analog dusk is more neutral, which is, I think that kind of corroborates what we're saying here.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and Josh says, I love distasteful coloration. And that's the problem with a lot of this is that tasteful for one person is distasteful for another. Like for me,
Yeah, I mean,
those Empire Ears IEMs, man, that's just like, what is going on with this coloration? But
no,
for
I
some
love
people,
that
they're like,
shit. I love
yeah,
that
they're like,
shit.
this is
Yeah,
amazing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Coloration is not a bad thing. It's just it's really tough to know how to like tune an IEM with intentionality towards that stuff when it's not even agreed upon what is and isn't a coloration. Like
Yeah.
I actually think like one of the benefits of like the new approach to
I know
tuning
where you're going with this, and I
is
completely
that you
agree.
can be a lot more intentional with what
Yes.
colorations you want to elicit. Like I actually like dead ass one of the if I ever did a collaboration, one of the ones I would want to do is something that is not JM1 meta things at all and is just like as technical or slammy or detailed or vivid or whatever I can make something because I actually think I could do that with more efficiency than I think some of the people who are doing that just by R&D of throwing a bunch of signatures at the wall and seeing which one
A
elicits that
thousand
response most
percent.
consistently.
A thousand. I completely agree. I have the same. Uh, well, so part of this is also because we know that in most cases, the like manufacturers are not up on the theory behind this, and when they are tuning things to match whatever this is, it's not because it's not for theoretical reasons. It's not
No,
like when
it's for
Axel
sales.
Girl
It's
makes it.
it's
It's
new
because that's
meta
what
is
sells.
now a marketing term,
Exactly. And so
and it's
and
falling victim to the same problems that all the other marketing terms
Yep,
like
when it was
Harman and IEF
Harmon,
had.
yep, exactly. And the other brands that are doing this whole coloration thing are literally throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks,
Yep.
right? There's not an intention, there's no, or it's it's rare to find
Yeah.
intentionality behind that. I
Yeah.
have seen
There's
it.
definitely some.
There's some, but
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so
Just KZO just saying, "This is all Chronicle's fault!" Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation.
this is kind of
I don't lay the blame solely at Crin's feet.
no, because people were doing this.
Mark has blame too.
Yeah. Well, and so does Harmon. Like Harmon
Yeah. Oh
20
my
Harmon
God. So does
2019
Harman.
is a
Yeah. I mean,
coloration,
look. I
and we
think
should
I think
recognize it that way.
all reviewers are actually complicit in this, including us.
Yeah.
Now, some of us are complicit for not doing enough to stop it. the the inaction of what is it? I don't feel like reciting the whole quote, but you know what I was going to say.
Yeah. What's the person who stands by and does nothing or whatever?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But also like there are places online that will say quite vociferously that if it matches Harmon 20 IE 2019 that it is neutral. And it's
Yeah.
like fucking no. Like this is just like colorations. Like it's like what it's colorations that
Yeah.
people might prefer, but there's nothing like this. We shouldn't be thinking of this as neutral, right?
Yeah, but also I think what's important to tell those people is that like there's no reason that you shouldn't prefer something that isn't neutral over something that is neutral.
So I say that again. There's no reason you shouldn't prefer
Yeah, so
something that
like something like the Harman IE 2019 target being preferable over like a very simplistic like
edemotic kind of thing.
yeah, where it is technically like more spectrally neutral in terms of
Yeah.
its overall like
Yeah.
slope, but just doesn't sound as interesting, appealing, or what have you. Like, I think it's
Yeah.
totally sensible to prefer the one that makes your music sound better.
That has the bass that go thumpy, right? Like
Yeah.
the one I suppose bit of or like section of evidence that I think is worth holding in view of that conversation is the Floyd Toole stuff about what people report as neutral is also the same thing that they report as enjoying, right? I
I
That's the
don't
one
think
thing
that's
that's
true
like
of IEM people.
that's what I was gonna say. It's like,
IEM
it's like I
people are
don't know.
so far off the reservation after years of just swimming in a pool of coloration, and that literally being all is available to them, which is not their fault.
Because but that also like that section comes from speaker um
Yeah, it's from sound reproduction.
yeah. So yeah, it's and also the other problem is of course the pinna bypass issue with IEMs. So it's like maybe for some people you're not going to have any of those problems because of the pinna assumption, because of pinna effects needing to be baked into the response. So yeah, I think we can wrap it up there. Hartu says Harman IE is a net negative to audio. I don't know that's a net negative to audio. In a way, it's been helpful because its prevalence has forced us to figure out what the fuck is going on here and why this result ended up being this way. And I don't think we would have
I'm gonna be honest.
progressed.
I actually think IEF neutral is a bigger problem.
Yeah, because it didn't have much theoretical
Well,
justification.
yeah, and it moved us away from HOTF, which I feel
Yeah,
like did
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
make for a weirder transition. Because if we were transitioning from Harman to now versus IEF to
Mhm.
now, it would have been a lot easier to explain to people
It's
because we
true.
wouldn't have had to explain the change in like the
Yeah.
ear gain structure.
Yeah, but also like like I wish that instead of Harman IE's narratives propagating, that we had instead gotten something like what Sean put together for the most recent stuff, and that taking over would have completely shaken up the paradigm and much more closely matched with where we are now. And I'm very, very glad that this has now happened. But it is still it does still fall on literal it does still fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, no, the whole sound guys finding has basically not done any numbers in our community. Like no
No,
one,
no,
no
I
one on
know.
Squiglink uses the sound guys target, even
Yeah.
though they probably should.
Well, but okay, but JM1 being there kind of satisfies this to a certain extent.
It does. There's only one version of JM1 though, because most people aren't like using the
Yeah.
version that allows you to
Yeah. Do
tilt
the thing.
and
Yeah.
shelf
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah,
So a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of people unfortunately have the wrong idea about that too, which is
Yeah.
not great. But anyway, we can end.
Work for us to do, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna end the stream. Big thanks to everybody for tuning in and watching. As always, these streams and all of our content here is brought to you by headphones.com. It's a great place to learn about and buy headphones. That's where we publish articles. Listeners' articles are up there. My articles are up there. Some of them. uh, and we also have a forum where you can contribute as well to this live stream podcast. We have a Discord. You can join us there. We have socials somewhere. I don't know if we've linked socials anywhere. We probably should do that at some point.
I
But
mean, I'm
yeah,
I'm off most of them now.
yeah,
Yeah. Blue Sky. If you want to
yeah.
find me in Blue
I'm
Sky.
on Blue Sky. Yeah, chat with me on Blue Sky. That's where I try and like hang out. It's
That's where I just follow whatever Sean is talking about. He's
yeah,
the
it's
only reason I'm on
literally
Blue
yeah.
Sky.
Yeah. There's a few other folks I follow, but yeah, Sean's on there, so that's always a good
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for the live stream. And we will see you guys in the next one. We have a video coming out tomorrow, I think. So make sure you guys watch that one.
Yeah.
So,
Stay tuned for that. Later, guys.